since we just keep diving into so many good things to talk about.
Yes.
No, we keep on saying
Hello.
what we're going to discuss.
I know, yes. Hello,
Hi.
everyone. Good afternoon. My condolences to Americans with student loan debt
Yeah.
this day.
Yeah. Seriously. Welcome, Eric. Eric Garcia to the show.
How you doing?
Hello. I guess I keep thinking that I should flip over to guest credits right away, so
Oh
people
yeah,
can be introduced.
as an introduction.
Um,
Yeah.
Thank you very
would
much.
would you mind introducing who you are?
Yeah, my name is Eric Garcia. I am the senior Washington correspondent at The Independent. I'm a columnist at MSNBC. I'm also the author of We're Not Broken, Changing the Autism Conversation, which came out in August 2021. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric M. Garcia, and you can follow me on Instagram at Eric M. Garcia 14. So.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you
Welcome.
so much for joining us. It's always such a pleasure talking to you. It's just you're just one of those people who just are so easy to talk to, and we just have so many intersecting interests as neurodivergent people who are freaky
We
about
do. Yeah,
politics
it
and
was funny
society.
because like I've told Devin this story, but it was funny because like last year, like a week before, a week after, because like Devin and I we met because I guest hosted an episode of NPR where I talked about interviewed you for your book,
Mhm.
and then a week later my dad I was back in California where I grew up because my dad was getting married, and I said yeah, I said like he's like I heard that episode of you with NPR, and he's like, that book came out around the same time yours did. I was like, yeah. And he was like, which book is better? I'm like, Dad, our books are similar. They complement each other.
Bro.
I love my
Wow, that's
dad.
bold.
I
Which
love
one
my
should I
dad.
read?
Which one should I read? Because well, he already read. Like to his credit, he read mine in a weekend.
Oh.
Like, my dad's a fast reader. I'm a slow reader. I didn't get that gene from him, but like it was very fun. I was like, Dad. No. I was like, no, like they kind of are siblings.
Yes, they're complementary, and the idea that like it's a misconception that any author has if they think that their book is in competition with a book that's in a similar space,
Yeah.
because what we need is people who think of more people to think of themselves as readers and saying I want to read books about these things, and so
Yeah.
Right.
you hook them once, then you've got them on the pipeline, baby.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why, and like, I mean, I'm sure, like, it's funny, like, I'm sure that like whenever you check your Amazon page or your book pages, like, and then like they say now our books are often like people who buy this book, but usually buy this
Hmm.
book. So like, or as a friend of mine DM'd me, because he was newly diagnosed and he sent this to me on Instagram and he's just like, hey, it's the self-diagnosis starter pack. It's like your book, my book, sincerely
Yeah.
your autistic child, and like
Mm-hmm.
neurotrans or something like that. So.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. It's all and ours actually really are just like content wise such a good complement to each other. I always tell
Yeah.
people if you really like chapter 8 of my book, or when I talk about more kind of policy oriented things, or kind of look more outward, you'll get a lot more of that in Eric's
And then
book.
when I say
So
if you liked the chapters on race and gender in my book, you'll love Devin's You'll love Devin's entire book. You know.
So
absolutely. And if
that
you hated that, then you'll hate both of ours, and you'll give
Yeah,
me,
yeah,
and you'll complain that I don't talk enough about white men, even though I'm a white man
yeah.
writing a
Or
book.
you'll complain that I don't talk enough about severely autistic people. You know,
Oh God.
uh,
Well, and we'll have plenty of space to talk about that today with the
or
subject of
profoundly. I
vaccines
think
too. Oh
yeah.
my God. Yeah, profoundly. It's Farrar in the chat said, "Happy Friday, folks. Looking forward to this stream as a fan of Eric's book and a regular reader of his work in the Independent." So
Thank you.
yes,
um
awesome.
yeah, Chubby Kumquat asks, is Eric's book useful for autistic neurodivergence?
Um, yeah, it is. It absolutely is. I mean, the basis of it was autism, but a lot of it is, I think the thing that's important to recognize is that a lot of the things that benefit autistic people benefit everybody with neurodivergent, like every neurodivergent person, and also a lot of people who aren't neurodivergent and who are able. Like, I mean, the thing that there's a big thing, and Devin knows this about the idea of curb cuts, which is
Hmm.
that something that benefits one group of people might benefit other people. So like one of the things that Devin and I talk about is that like we were literally just talking about before the stream was that like Devin and I may like sensory friendly environments, but then one of my closest friends in the world, she's a mom, and like she wants to be able of a 3.5-year-old. And what do parents of 3.5-year-olds want? They want to go to restaurants and bars that aren't too loud,
Right.
to disrupt their kids, or things like that. Or, parents of babies. Like, one rule that I've always learned is don't wake up a sleeping baby. But like, parents don't want to go out, and they don't want to go to a place
Mm-hmm.
that's too loud. So yeah, absolutely. I think that a lot of the things in my book are totally handy for holistic for non-autistic neurodivergent people with ADHD, people with Tourette's, people with bipolar disorder. Yeah, I mean, it's autism focused, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a lot that you can't get gleaned from it.
Absolutely. And I think especially what comes to mind for me is like the housing chapter or just
Yes.
passages in the book where you talk about like just most of us do not live independently, and even if we are like low support needs or whatever, we have to kind of rethink what it means to live an independent adult
Yeah.
life, just in general, and that's true for a lot of disabled
Yeah,
people.
sorry, because like I'm gonna say this because I don't want to forget it. I know that before we go off, because like um, I think that because I think that the independent living movement and like I think that a lot of people have even a lot of people with disabilities have this misconception about what it means to be independent, because I think that what happened is that it, it's the right intent, which is that because for so long, so many of us were like our autistic and otherwise neurodivergent ancestors, so to speak, were warehoused in institutions and state hospitals, things like that. I think that we tend to think that the platonic ideal is being able to live on our own, like living independently means this very narrow thing, which is be able to live on our own, be able to fend for ourselves, to do all these other things. Let me close this door.
Right.
You know, and there are some people who could do that. I'm not knocking that, but I think that but I think that the term independent can mean so many different things. It can mean living with your family. It can mean living with a roommate or living with someone else. I live with I have a flatmate, but the idea behind independence, whatever it may look like to me, at its core means the ability to make your own choices. I
Yeah.
think that's what
Mm.
defines independence differently from being institutionalized or living in a group home or living in a state hospital or things like that, is the ability to come and go when you please, and the ability to do things and make your own decisions about where you want to live, when you want to eat, when you want to, you know, all those things. So I think that um, it, and we could talk about this later, but like I think that we need to redefine what being independent means, because I think as of right now, weirdly enough, when I think a lot of neurodivergent people think about independence, we're still thinking within a neurotypical paradigm of what independence means.
Yes. Yeah. And this is something that I also talk about sometimes in the context of the rights of children. We have this paradigm in our mind of you either get support and you have no autonomy, or you get
Yes.
autonomy and you have no support. And it's
Yes.
not necessary for these two things to be tied to each other. And there's this weird spirit of resentment sometimes among people of thinking, oh, if you're on your own, you get the privilege of being on your own, but that means you don't get to be coddled. Like receiving any aid or support is seen as this
Yeah.
unfair benefit that you like have to suffer a lot to deserve or lose your freedoms to
Yeah,
deserve.
these
And it
two
doesn't have
things
to be
kind
that way.
yeah, and again, it's still existing within a neurotypical paradigm and still living within a very ableist paradigm. And I don't begrudge anybody who thinks that way, because and your book goes into is that these structures. I think the one thing that our books have in common is we talk a lot about more about structures than we do about individual actions, and the
Mm-hmm.
structures that. So as a result, it's even when we begin the process of unmasking, at least what I've noticed, is that oftentimes, first we do it on an individual level, but then we think about, but I think unmasking also, and I think you would agree, also then we then go to kind of a structural level. I think that's kind of why I became a political journalist, and this could, I hope people find this helpful, is that like, I think the most helpful question that both that a journalist can ever ask, the most powerful tool is asking the question why. And I think that in the
Mm-hmm.
same way, that impulse that drives me to be a journalist and say, why does this work, or why is this the way it is the same one that now that I'm writing a lot about autism and disability makes me think, well, why do these structures exist for people with disabilities?
Yeah, and we need more journalists who are asking that why. Like, as Maddie and I have a segment on this stream where we will sometimes cover some of the profiles that end up getting dunked on a lot on Twitter of various, figures, some of the very like credulous kind of profiles like the Elizabeth Holmes one and things like that.
Yep.
And that's one pocket of journalism, and obviously that exists
Yeah,
to
of
drive
course.
in a lot of clicks, and it's great and it's effective at that. But I think just in general in political reporting too, like the responsibility to ask, I don't know, hard hitting questions is such a cliche, but like actually drill down into the history and the systems and how things fit together and what the incentives are and why these things
Right.
happen. Otherwise, you're just reading the label. You're not reading the what's in the container. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I consider it an incredible privilege to be able to do this. I know that one of the things that I say is that yes, I'm disabled. Yes, I'm Latino. Yes, I have a lot. I came from a single parent household, things like that. But I also recognize that I have this wonderful blessing, this wonderful opportunity that a lot of other people, especially a lot of other disabled people, don't have. So it's incumbent on me to ask these questions for the community, the tribe, the the la gente, whatever you want to call us.
Right.
Absolutely. And when it comes, speaking of just kind of the journalistic work you do, you have a piece, you filed it. I don't think it's out yet, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. About
Yeah.
the whole legacy of the Kennedy family and their
Yes.
relationship to disability. Do you want to talk a
Yes.
little bit about that?
Yeah, so I just filed it. We just put it through edits. It's going to come out later, and then if you guys want to share the link later, like we'll do that. So
Yeah.
basically, what was
If
interesting
you're
to me.
watching if you're watching the video on demand later, we'll put a link to it in the description.
In the
Yeah,
description. Yeah.
absolutely, and I'll share it on my channels on the internets. Um, but one of the things that fascinated me was that so like I've thought about this a lot. Is that what's interesting about RFK Jr. We all know that he's I was talking about this with Michael Hobbs, the founder of About, the old host of About. We were talking about this. Is that now he no longer really talks about vaccines and autism anymore, but like he just kind of just says vaccines as a whole are bad. Like it's kind of like he's moved on beyond. But like is that he started with the vaccine thing, like a lot of people did with autism, and I thought, wow, it's kind of interesting because his uncle was the author of the Americans with Disabilities Act, Senator
Yeah.
Ted
Ted Kennedy.
Kennedy,
Yeah.
and then his father was really one of the instrumental voices in closing Willowbrook State School, which was for those, like, I'm sure people have seen documentaries of that state school. If people who don't know, it was Geraldo Rivera who did the first documentary on it,
Oh
uh,
wow.
and,
Yeah, I
and like
remember that actually. Yeah.
yeah, you probably see if you've been in graduate school or if you've seen like history. If you see anything about the history of deinstitutionalization, and then on top of that, his father, his uncle John F. Kennedy, President John F. Kennedy, was the began the institutionalization movement with the Community Health Act that was signed in 1963. Literally the last law that he signed before he was shot and killed, and
Wow.
then. Yeah, I learned that this week and I nearly fell out of my chair.
Yeah.
Um, and then of course and I talk about the controversies around the Special Olympics. But Eunice Kennedy Shriver was the founder of Special Olympics. But then the real seed of the seed of the Kennedys' interest in disability comes from um, the John F. Kennedy's sister Rosemary Kennedy, who was born with an intellectual disability, what was then called mental retardation, and this was around the time you have to remember the Kennedys were Irish Catholic. At the time, if you had an intellectual disability, the church, you could not get confirmation and you could not receive communion if you were.
Wow.
Wow.
I
I
did
did
not
not
know
That was
know
that.
something
that.
that I learned.
Yeah.
And there's still like a lot of debate about like intellectual disability and receiving communion and confirmation. So as you can imagine, for an Irish Catholic family, that was very central. Then what happened was incidentally enough, the first, like a lot of people think that John F. Kennedy was the first Kennedy, but there was also another one, Joe Jr., who was the son of Joseph P. Kennedy. He was, incidentally enough, when the Kennedy family was living in the UK at the time when Joe Sr. was ambassador to the U.S., and he was kind of a Nazi sympathizer. Um,
Mm-hmm.
he sent his son to go live in visit Nazi Germany, and his brother and Joe Jr. talked about like praised Hitler's forced sterilization laws.
Wow.
Um, there's a letter of him like calling them like the most disgusting. But hold on, I have it here. I'm gonna pull it up right
Yeah.
now. Like,
And that stuff is also a circle too, because all the
yes,
Nazis were inspired by the American stuff, like not only
yes, they were.
disabilities but also Jim
Uh,
Crow and all that stuff.
Harry Laughlin,
Yes.
the Buck v. Bell decision. A lot of and Hitler gave awards to a lot of Americans who worked on eugenics. So yeah, like there's this one letter where they says where John Jr. says like he hoped that Hitler's law would quote do away with many of the disgusting specimens which inhabit this earth. Um, and that was the forced sterilization law.
Hachi
Under
machi.
yeah, right.
Wow. Yeah.
Jesus. Yeah, but like, and of course, what happened is Joe Jr. Dies in World War II, and so what happens is, and then this is like kind of ableism reinforces itself, is that so Joe Sr. Wanted his son to be president, so he puts it on the next son, which is John F. Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, and covers up the fact that he has Addison's disease. And all the while, Joe Sr. is really freaked out that his daughter's intellectual disability, because she was starting to have outbursts and she was starting to, she would sometimes injure people, things like that. So basically, what happens is they subject her to a prefrontal lobotomy.
Yeah,
And
that fact by itself is something I had known, but not the stuff around it.
yeah, so like it's important to recognize that like, and so what happened is they sent her away to this home in Wisconsin, to this home for people with disabilities in Wisconsin. And after 1944, there's this article in KQED that talks about this. Um, all mentions of Rosemary Kennedy and Kennedy family letters are basically gone.
Yeah.
And Eunice Kennedy Shriver said she didn't know
Oh my
where.
God. Charlie is pressing
Oh,
buttons.
sorry.
And I think that's the first time that's happened. Charlie literally pressed a button to
As
do
a
that.
cat owner, I totally love that.
Freak of the week
Because Bam
intrusion.
Bam has done that a few times.
Charlie is
Um,
the
Yeah.
freak of the week this week.
Yeah.
no, I don't know. Yeah. But no, I appreciate that. I'm sure Bam Bam endorses. And Bam Bam's the name of my cat, who you guys
Yeah.
have probably been seeing.
Yeah.
Yes.
But
Unfortunately,
but
the I noticed I cropped you on the actual Twitch, so I don't know if people have seen the very cute kitten jumping in your window, so we'll have to show them.
yeah, but but yeah. So like, it's important to recognize that 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 Rosemary Kennedy was born during a time in America, not just in Germany, but in America as well. Like,
Right.
where people with disabilities were still very undesirable. A lot of American elites, like John Harvey Kellogg, yeah, the Kellogg guy behind Kellogg's cereal, um, was was a eugenicist. A lot of the elites, Theodore Roosevelt, not Franklin Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt was a eugenicist. He supported forced sterilization. Alexander Graham Bell was a eugenicist. So it's and I think that this is really kind of an important, because it's funny because like basically the next generation of Kennedys, who was Bobby RFK Jr.'s father's generation, the one that we kind of associate with the Kennedys. Basically, what I've kind of thought is that they basically were this was their attempt to atone for their father's sins. Um, and I know that the Kennedy family was very Catholic. This was very low key, kind of one of those things that I think they did. I think they felt really bad about what happened to their sister,
Right.
and as a result, really didn't want to have that happen anyway again. So what did they do? They passed things like the Community Mental Health Act, and for all the criticisms that the Special Olympics have, and I know that a lot of people with disabilities have criticism of them. I think the thing that they tried to do at least was like give visibility to people with disabilities because that was something that wasn't afforded to their sister. And then I think
Right.
the same thing could be said with ending Willowbrook and state schools because and I think it's important. There's almost two things I think about disability, and Devin and I have talked about this in deinstitutionalization. One is like, yeah, institutions are bad, but I think that there's also almost this kind of underlying more important thing, which is that when people live in the community, then it becomes all of our responsibility to change the world for people with disabilities. It's no longer just like one person's problem or one institution's problem. It requires the entire world to move and accommodate and adapt. So it's in that cauldron. I think it's important to know that history in order to talk about RFK Jr. and how something can go so awry and it's almost kind of this reversion to his grandfather's generation about disability. And then also it should be noted that his grandfather was a noted, like a lot of people who worked in Hollywood at the time, a huge anti-Semite, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and a huge conspiracy theorist about the Jews, which RFK Jr. is now buddying around with Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson and other anti-Semites. Even if he doesn't say anti-Semitic things himself, he's definitely buddies with anti-Semites.
Right.
Right. Yeah. It's amazing how much it just has come full circle. And of course, all of these movements have always been,
Yes.
eugenics, white supremacy, just anti-immigrant sentiment, ableism. They've
Yeah.
just always been interwoven with each other. And you
Yeah,
can't,
and you
you
can't
pull
talk
one thread,
about
they
the
all tighten up. Yeah.
and you can't really the irony, of course, is that the generation before Joe Senior were Irish immigrants, but they were all, and it was a time of large anti-Irish sentiment
Right.
and large anti-Catholic sentiment in the 1910s and the early 1910s all the way to the 1930s and 40s were incredibly anti-Catholic in the United States. The whole reason the 1924 Johnson-Reed Act was passed was basically to restrict Italians, and Catholics and people who were under the influence of the Vatican, from
Right.
entering. To say nothing of wanting to keep Jews Jews and Chinese people out. Which those were the two people that all nativists hated and all racists and things like that hated.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And it was just so baked into our laws going back so far, especially, yeah, just some of the immigration laws being opposed to just Chinese immigrants from like the outset of like the railroad and things like
And
that.
like almost as soon as like the California Gold Rush,
Right.
like you get anti-Chinese sentiment.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I
Right.
think it's one thing that I think is really fascinating in a really upsetting way is the way that like so much conspiracy theories are just still the what is it called, the blood libel, which is like
Yeah.
the foundational Nazi myth that like Jews are stealing your babies for their blood and all this stuff, and that stuff is like it's still like QAnon, and which is this sort of like I think we'll talk more about that as we get more into RFK Jr. about how like all of these conspiracy theories are sort of melting into this single funnel.
Yeah.
But it's wild how much that's still like. I mean, the Pizzagate stuff, the the Hillary Clinton and all of the elites are adrenochrome. All that stuff is the
Mm-hmm.
same core conspiracy theory, which is really scary and
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the Pizzagate thing because it's funny because like, um, I was, one of the things I do in my downtime is I play with other musicians, and one guy I was jamming with last night, who was a bass player, he had a Comet Ping Pong shirt on, and it's funny because like, it's so weird because like I live in DC, and the bookstore that I did my opening event for, the opening of my book, was done at the bookstore that's right next to Comet Ping Pong. So like that is what makes it even all the more visceral is that like,
Yeah.
that shooting happened in a neighborhood that I frequent,
Right.
or the attempted shooting,
Mm-hmm.
and it shows that like these kind of fever dream conspiracy theories have real consequences
Yeah.
for people who often don't deserve them. Um, and I think that like what's important about the to your point about like the QAnon and the blood lab was interesting. Is this last weekend for my job, I was at the I was at the Faith and Freedom Coalition gathering, and it is funny how much the talk around, because like also incidentally enough, RFK was speaking at Moms for Liberty. I think he might have canceled or something like that in Philadelphia this weekend, and it's basically the same thing, except like instead of the Jews, it's the trans people are coming for your
Right.
children, and
Mm-hmm.
they're recruiting your children. That's like it's become such a, and I've talked about this with Brandy Scalace frequently, that like that is the kind of almost unifying. That's like the unbridled id of the modern right wing movement these days. Is transphobia.
Right.
Um,
Which is also not new. I mean, that also literally
no, it
goes back
isn't.
to Nazi Germany, where all of those famous photos of book burnings were actually Devin, do you
Agnes
remember
Hirschfeld.
this?
The Hirschfeld
Yeah,
Institute.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's all
Uh,
early science on trans people that they burned
Yeah, and
because
queer
yeah, the
sexuality.
first
Yeah.
transgender clinic was in Berlin. My friend Brandy is having a book that's coming out later, I think next year, about this. That I'm looking forward to when it comes. I'm probably going to promote the hell out of it on social media. So, um, but yeah, that was literally. And what's ironic, and it shows, is that Hirschfeld was a eugenicist. We should not sugarcoat that. And
Mm-hmm.
ironically, the same ideas that he espoused eventually came for him as a gay Jew living in Berlin. Um, so yeah, these are the same things. The same. It's funny how much things change and how much they don't. How much they don't change, and how
yeah.
these kind of things, like viruses, almost mutate consistently throughout the years. But the still, like the germ and the seed, starts somewhere.
Right. A lot of it is this very again old, well-worn fascist fear of decadence, of like
Yes.
losing attachment to tradition and the family, and this, of course, the idea of a traditional family is just this made up history
Right.
that's just kind of transposed onto the reality of just how diverse human living situations have always been. Um, oh my God, it's Eddie in the chat said the book Fearing the Black Body by Sabrina Strings focuses
Yes.
mostly on the history of fat phobia coming from anti blackness, but it also shows the direct ties with the eugenics movement and anti immigrant sentiment.
Yes, that. So it's
Yeah.
interesting because again, I went to college in North Carolina, and when I was a student there, there was, so people forget, after Germany, after Nazi Germany, all the way until the 1970s, North Carolina forcibly sterilized plenty of mostly black women,
Mm-hmm.
who were seen
Yeah.
as deviant, or they had children out of wedlock, or they were teen moms, or things like that.
Yeah. And the
This
state of
was
California did it to women, incarcerated women, until very recently.
yeah, and like there was a whole. They eventually did work out a reparations program for in North Carolina. I can't speak for California, but yeah, like I mean, California was a hotbed of the eugenics movement for a long time. Doesn't surprise me because there's a lot of academic institutions in California. So like where there was academia for a long time, there was a lot of eugenics activity. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, it doesn't surprise. But yeah, Fear of the Black Body. I've heard that's a good book. I've heard of that. There's also the book Killing the Black Body, which is also similar about that a friend of mine recommended that I want to read it soon. So
And something that's really interesting to me is how much, because again, it comes back in circles in very interesting ways, the relationship between the eugenicist movement and public health, and how that
yes,
we can draw a line between that and anti-vax sentiment today. So,
yes.
there's a lot of weird historical legacies to things like that, such as one of the reasons we even have public pools in a lot of cities in this country is originally it was rooted in this almost anti-immigrant sentiment that immigrants and poor people of color didn't bathe, and so we would create these like public institutions where they were required to bathe before getting into the pool as a way to make them be hygienic.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's
And then
such a
there's the full circle
strange.
movement where, like, in many cities across America, once pools were forced to integrate, a lot of cities filled the pools with concrete. So there's
Right.
just, you know,
Right. Yeah, they didn't want to actually share those resources with people of color because they still saw them as dirty
dirty.
and
Yeah.
untouchable. Yeah. And it's interesting because I think a lot of people still have this misconception of anti-vaxxers and conspiracy theorists and people like that as being exclusively a right phenomenon. But there's so many, uh,
Elites.
yeah, so
Yeah.
many elites, so many liberals
Yeah.
who hold these same latent
You don't have to tell me. I
viewpoints.
grew up in Southern California, where, like,
Yeah.
where there are plenty of yoga moms, and again, we were talking about this on in the chat. Like, I think for a long time, one of the most unvaccinated areas in the country was Marin County, California, which is like near the Bay Area, where there's a lot of people, and like there was right before 2015, like in 2015, there was an article in Wired magazine that showed like a lot of the daycares in the Bay Area. Um, had unvaccinated children, and there were problems with measles, like children didn't get their measles, mumps, rubella shot. It's never about, I think, in a lot of ways, because I think that we tend to think about anti-vaxxers in the same way we think about racists and anti-Semites, which is we think that they're, I think that it's a very liberal impulse to say that, oh, well, these people are ill-educated and they don't have the information, when in fact, oftentimes the engines of anti-immigrant, ableist sentiment, um, anti women, anti LGBTQ plus sentiment come from elite institutions. Devin and I know the history of ABA, which was Ola Iver Lavas at UCLA was also a big engine for conversion therapy for
Mm-hmm.
LGBTQ plus people, and this was at UCLA. So I think that it almost kind of terrifies a lot of people to think that very well educated people could be this way, not just it isn't just somebody in the middle of nowhere with no access to information. There are plenty of elites who have very noxious views, and in many ways they're the engines who spread information to the ill and to people without access to to the actual truth.
Right.
So elites. It's very. I think it's almost soothing to think that if people just get the right information, they can't. They won't have these views, but
Mm-hmm.
really, oftentimes it isn't. You know.
Absolutely. Yeah, and those are the people who are downstream from that are definitely the people that I have more sympathy for, right? People
Yes.
who don't have access to those resources. But a lot of times, yeah, when we really drill down into it, it is people with elite status trying to maintain that status. And I think also there's this sense of like psychological insulation that they feel, which is part
Yes.
of why they're more comfortable risking their kids' lives not getting vaccinated. It's why they're comfortable, some of them getting into unregulated
I
submarines.
was just gonna
You
say,
know.
yeah.
Yeah. This goes to something that a friend of mine that somebody tweeted at me many years ago. I forgot who tweeted at me, and it's lost to the mentions of the DMs and things like that. But somebody said because like one of the biggest funders of anti-vax movements is like this really wealthy, like I think art collector in New York City. I forget his name. There was this article in the Washington Post. I'll drop it I'll email it to you guys so you guys can drop it in the chat. It came out in 2019, so right before COVID. But like
Mm-hmm.
what interested me was because when this was something like as we mentioned, like very elite people in Silicon Valley and people like who don't want to vaccinate their kids as well. It's almost like as if they are so rich they don't need to participate in the social contract.
Yeah.
Right.
Think about like how many celebrities in the 2000s were anti-vaccine. People like Jenny McCarthy and Jim Carrey and Oprah Winfrey platformed a lot of anti-vaxxers. Or, Jenny McCarthy for a while. Like people who are, and then like think about how many wealthy Park Slope Brooklynites. It's like almost because like if you are at a certain level of wealth, you don't feel a need to participate in like these things that we collectively do to mitigate disaster. Similarly, not unlike what we do with climate change,
Yeah.
like there are certain people who feel like they are above like having to do their collective part in climate change, and they leave it to the poors. Like that's why you have all this talk about having us do recycling, and I'm not against recycling. I literally have a recycling bin over here, but like a lot of the wealthy elites don't feel a need to do their part in like
Yeah,
fixing the structures.
that whole thing was a oil company, like
Yeah.
carbon footprints were that
Mm-hmm.
idea of carbon footprints was an invention by oil companies to place to like change
For the
the
onus.
blame. Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, so like I think that it's so like it doesn't surprise me like Devin and we were saying that this that something like anti-vax sentiment could come from elite institutions because it almost because it exempts people who are elite from having to do things. It's like herd immunity, that's for poor people.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, and it also just does make me think about a lot of systemic factors in how accessing healthcare in the U.S. works. And this is something that Maddie, you and I have talked about on here, and I've written about in the context of uh, queer affirming healthcare, but it applies to healthcare across the board. There's one way of accessing healthcare if you are poor or you're reliant
yes,
on public health clinics or
Medicaid.
marketplace health insurance. Yeah, and then if you're wealthy, you can access this boutique kind of care that is far more specialized. A lot of it is a lot more woo woo, right? You're just paying a specialist to give you, a chiropractic adjustment or a Reiki reading or something like that, in addition to, maybe some actual care, whatever best practices, peer reviewed medical care. And so that also helps really put a lot of these elite people on this pipeline of, they don't have to interface with the health systems that the rest of us have
Yeah.
to interface with. They are paying for someone to treat them like they're very important and to listen to them. And those things do lead to a better outcome in certain ways psychologically, even if what they're doing is peddling something that's complete like quackery. Or if they are just giving you boutique regular care that's just, at a much
Yeah.
higher
Yeah,
premium.
I hadn't thought of it that way. That's a really good way of putting it, which is that like by being on a separate track, they don't think about the public writ large. And as you said, like I mean, look, there are a lot of problems with public health. Like you said, a lot of it is rooted in eugenics. But I mean, there are some things that do need to be done collectively. Like one person getting vaccinated isn't going to stop a pandemic, but like 70 or 80% of people getting vaccinated. So like when you have this slice of elites doing that, then then that like who believe that they are exempt from the rules
Right.
or not believe, oftentimes they are exempt from
They
the rules.
are.
Right.
Yeah.
That then of course they're not going to think of something like public health as important a lot of one of the things that got me really mad was like during even before there was a vaccine I would get really mad that I would see like people going on vacation to Maine. Like I'm sure you saw a lot of people like going to Maine or New England during the pandemic, and it was just like, before there was a vaccine, before there was anything, and I was just like not wearing masks, anything, and it's just like, well, it makes sense because if you can afford to charter a plane, then like, well, wearing a mask that's for poor people.
Right.
Yeah.
Uh,
I've been kind of stunned hearing now more stories kind of percolate of what various celebrities were doing during the pandemic. We all knew
Oh, that
about
is so fascinating, isn't it?
yeah.
like we all knew that Kim Kardashian had like a bunch of people fly out to an island for her birthday, but even people that I like, and this is not to single the person out or slam them, I only know about this because I like them, but reading about Janelle Monáe and the writing of her latest album, it was written during a bunch of parties she would have at her house during 2020 with tons of people.
Wow.
Oh my god! So it's
um,
basically she was like one of the characters in Glass Onion.
it was kind of like a glass onion thing, and
That's
were they
wild.
and there was whatever, there was testing, it was outdoor parties, whatever. I'm not people know that I'm a lot more understanding of people bending certain guidelines in order to stay sane, but it's also like, okay, if somebody who a celebrity that a lot of us probably like kind of admire, a lot of like queer people and so forth, like they just live in a totally different standard
They do, yeah.
of reality. Like it's
Right.
it's so skewed that that you see that
And on top of
manifested in their choices.
and on top of that, if you're rich, if you have that, if you are part of my French fuck you money, you can afford if you get COVID to get good care.
Yeah.
Like I like one of the funny things I thought about, and again because like I was living in Washington D.C., but like when Trump got COVID, it was like yeah, well like he can afford to like because he's the president, he'll go to Walter Reed and he'll
Mm-hmm.
get the best doctors.
Right.
But like when I thought about it was like because like when I was a White House intern, I became friends or like befriended Secret Service agents. I was like, yeah, but they're not going to be able to go to Walter Reed,
Right.
Right.
But so like there was this weird kind of um, paradox of like there's like the president of the United States because like yeah, if a president gets a deadly virus, that is kind of a national security concern. It's a national security crisis, and but then like by him doing that stunt, he's putting all these other people in his periphery in danger
Yeah.
just by virtue of
Mm-hmm.
him getting COVID.
Right,
And
and just all those events, yeah.
Yeah,
and
that entire ecosystem.
I think that that is like that just reminds me of like how frustrating it is because I think one of the things that we wanted to talk about with like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is like how this is not a right wing. This is not only a right
No, it
wing
isn't.
thing, and so and that's what we were just talking about. Like this is not only a like ignorant yokel thing. This is also an
Yeah,
elitist thing, but it's also
it
like this
is.
is not only a Republican thing. Like if you look at like I think of myself as being pretty cynical about, you know, liberal like politics, but the fact that we went from Trump, who so obviously, he was actively like saying that like to take bleach and like it's not real and all
Yeah,
that stuff. And we went from him to Biden, but then nothing changed. Like sure the
yeah,
messaging changed a little bit, but barely. And we still are
right.
on this same track of like oh well, it's a personal problem. You guys should be masking, and if you get COVID, it's because you didn't mask well enough. Instead of whereas, like the people that meet at the G6 are like the buildings that they're meeting in have had completely revamped HVAC systems so that
Yeah,
and but we're not doing that in schools. We're telling people, oh, just
yeah,
go back to school. The vaccine that is effective but still is not completely
yeah.
effective. It's only so effective. Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah. I
that's
mean, look,
enough.
I mean, I got COVID a month ago, and like, look, I mean, yeah, I was vaccinated, but like, yeah, COVID still sucks. And it was just
Yeah.
like, but then I thought to myself, like, oh man, thank God I have insurance so that the vaccine was free,
Yes, we're
But
not
like,
even paying for
Yeah,
the
it's not free
vaccine
anymore.
anymore.
Tests aren't free anymore. Like it's unreal. Like
yeah,
It's
like I mean, I
unreal.
think like I last time I bought tests, like it put me back like $40, and I was just thinking like, look, I make good money now. Like I'm
Right.
very thankful that I have money now. But I'm just thinking to myself like, man, $40, that's gonna set a family back like for four tests or something like that.
Right.
oh
I,
my
I, I
god.
think a lot about
Yeah.
the idea of ecofascism, right? And it's like this is the same
Oh,
thing. Like that's what you're saying about climate change, where it's like just no, this is our strategy. Our strategy is to just, blood for the blood machine. We'll just let them die. And
yeah,
even though that doesn't even work, because the whole thing is like, well, the economy needs people to. And what was the study that just came out that as so many people have long COVID that the economy is suffering because of how many
yeah,
people have
exactly.
died or are permanently disabled. And then so this
Yeah,
is just ongoing forever, even under democratic leadership. And now
yeah,
that's going to be the same strategy that we have for climate change. It's going to be like, oh, well, it's just the poor people in Florida that are having a problem, well, that they
or
deserve it because they're in Florida.
Yeah.
yeah, or like
Yeah.
the people in New York City right now who again like the second time in a month again are having to like have poor air quality.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, we just had that in the Midwest here, so we
Yep.
got our
yeah,
first
exactly.
taste of it after seeing Californians live with it for years, and
Yeah, and
now
again,
it's
I grew
touching
up in
all of
Southern
us.
California, where where there was regularly wildfires that needed to be contained.
Right.
Seb says our prime minister in the UK literally said he would rather see bodies pile up in this pile. I think it was pile high in the streets than do another
Yes.
lockdown at one point. And it's the same. Yeah,
Was
it's the
that
same
was that
everywhere.
Sunak or was that Johnson?
I
Because
think it
because
was
I remember.
Johnson.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was Boris, which that feels very Boris Johnson to say. Um,
Yeah, Trump light for sure. Just so brazen, we
yeah,
know that's the priorities of a lot of people, but to say it that outright is,
yeah.
pretty rough.
Um, but yeah, like I mean, I think that the question of it, like it doesn't surprise me. And again, we were talking about this. Anti-vax sentiment. Like a lot of people, again, like because yes, I poke fun at mommy bloggers, and you and I have had our by virtue of us being writers who write about autism and being openly autistic, we get a lot of those slings and arrows. But like, and so like, yeah, I dunk on them on social media, and I have fun doing that, and sometimes they deserve it. But like, let's also talk about the fact that the reason why these people fall in, get suckered in, is because there's this power vacuum. Because like, what do we do? Like, it doesn't surprise me. Again, we're saying that like, it doesn't surprise me that moms have been the end, like have been that
Right.
hotbed or that cradle of the sentiment, because a if you have an able-bodied like an able child, childcare is garbage or daycare is garbage,
Hmm.
or you have to pay like half your mortgage to afford childcare, and the resources and all that, and how much it costs to even have a baby to get pregnant. But on top of that, if you have a disabled child, if you don't have a lot of resources, and a lot of times it is very even getting on Medicaid, getting on wait lists, getting on I have again, as Devin says, I have a whole chapter about the Medicaid wait lists and how much and how long it is. Like I've heard of people being told to put their kids on the Medicaid wait list like as young as like 6 or 7, so that they could get ready so that it's like by the time they're 18 they're eligible for it.
Wow.
But it doesn't surprise me that when there is this vacuum of resources, that something like like anti-vaccine sentiment
Right.
almost kind of is a salve,
Yeah.
and it's like, well, it isn't your fault that your child is disabled.
Yep.
It's the fault of doctors pumping up your child with all these
Right.
drugs.
My we mentioned it before.
Yes.
My mom my brother who passed recently is he was pretty
Uh,
like he was very high needs, kind of low, very low functioning. He wasn't able to communicate in any way. He wasn't in any way independent. Needed could like kind of feed himself with a spoon. That was sort of his level, and also had a lot of pretty severe uh, self injury. And my mom is an anti-vaxxer. I mean,
yeah.
she's very it's very specific, and she has this extremely heartbreaking story of she basically she was like he was a normal baby, and they gave him the vaccines, and I could see right there on the table, his eyes went wide, and he started screaming, and he was never the same. And I very much understand that that is a very anecdotal thing, and like
Yeah.
clearly that is not. I believe her that that's how it felt. Like, even though I don't think
Yes.
that is the like cause and
It's
effect
very
how that. Right.
yeah, very
And
Kurosawa.
nobody
Yeah.
fucking helped her for her whole goddamn life. I mean,
Yeah.
he had fucking tardive dyskinesia because he was on Ativan for his whole fucking life because nobody else could do anything. He just literally throughout his entire life was no one was really able to help. No one did fucking anything for him. And there was so many stories throughout his life where they actively harmed him, like
Yeah.
stories of like him being in group homes, and he got MRSA, and they fucking dropped him on the steps of the hospital and left him there. I mean,
Oh my
Christ.
god.
they fucking they did things with where they stopped him on Ativan cold turkey, and he had huge symptoms from that, and when they knew that that would cause huge like disabilities and stuff.
Yeah.
And and so and she never trusted the medical institution, and I don't fucking blame her. And
Yeah.
also, like you said, she was told that he had autism because she was a refrigerator mom. She was told that it was because we had cats. She was told all of these things, and so I fucking get it. I get it that she doesn't, like you just said, she that was a way for her to be like, this was a thing that was outside of my control, which
This is something that was done to me.
right,
Mm-hmm.
right. And yeah, so
Yeah.
it's wild, and I get it, and I wish, and it was throughout his whole life, it was just he never got any help, and she never got any help. I mean, she literally took care of him. Like, there was a couple different times that he went to different homes. Mostly they were all fucking horrible. Like, I know specifically one fucking closed down shortly after he left because somebody fucking died, because they like
Mm.
because of it was one of the last like giant warehouse places where somebody fucking died shortly after he left, and they closed it down. Like,
Yeah.
um so I get it. And that was
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
thing that we wanted to talk about on here, because it's like, yeah,
Yeah. No. No. I mean, I think that is incredibly important. When systems fail,
right,
um, misinformation and disinformation thrives.
right,
And because they do, it was funny because like what was funny is I went back when I was researching my book initially. It was funny, and you mentioned the refrigerator mom thing, and that was a real thing. Like
yeah,
Bruno Bellon, he would go on late night television. Like he was kind of like the Dr. Phil of his time, with all the bad stuff included with Dr. Phil.
Mm-hmm.
But like and he was talking this stuff on television and writing articles for the Atlantic and shit like that. So like, what was interesting is when I went back and I read the transcripts of the original congressional hearings with Andrew Wakefield and saw the testimony. What was fascinating was how many people prefaced their questions for Wakefield, members of Congress, mind you, saying like, "We're glad we moved on from blaming parents, and now we're doing this." So like, it's funny like how
Mm.
almost this was almost kind of, the anti-vax sentiment was almost kind of a methadone for
Yeah.
from like refrigerator moms to this thing, But like the bigger thing, and like is that I think that this goes to the larger sentiment and why what RFK did was so toxic was that it treated autism as something that happened to people.
right,
Right.
One of the studies that I didn't get to include in my book, but what was interesting to me was how um, a lot of Latino and Latina, I guess, Latina mothers of autistic kids felt that this was something that God gave them, like them having an autistic child was something. And not surprising, a lot of Latinos are religious. You know, my mom's Latina, she's religious. But like and that could go one of two ways. It could mean that like, well, God gave you this thing because and now that means you have to care for it. And people like also it's like sometimes you feel like God cursed you with it. So like it's funny how it's this thing that's treated as something that's done to them. And it was interesting, like in a study I cited in the book, and Devin knows about it. It's like it's interesting how autism in different media spaces was discussed, because like mainstream media kind of talked about autism not in a great way, but like almost in a public health thing. But like women's magazines, like there was this one quote where one mom said that her child getting an autism diagnosis was like a gun to the head,
Right.
and um, and it is unsurprising how, but like what that does is that again it's still operating within a negative medical model, fixing the disabled person model, with it, rather than okay uh, we have this this person is a person with a disability. How do we make life better for them?
Right.
But like that takes such and again like Devin likes to say that I'm more charitable than other people. I have my moments where I'm not so charitable, but like I admit that having that paradigm shift from like how do you fix something and this thing happened to you to how do we make things better for your kid is a huge lift in a world that actively hates people with disabilities.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you and I, Eric, have talked about this before too, where when these moms predominantly, but autism parents in general, were fed this narrative of, the famous Autism Speaks ad where, I'm
I am
autism,
autism.
yeah, I'm stealing your child away from you. I'm ensuring that you're going to get a divorce, which was all completely falsified data, by the way. If you've seen that
No.
statistic that, 85% of marriages where there's an autistic child end in divorce, it's completely made
My
up.
parents were divorced, but autism had nothing to do with my parents'
Right.
divorce.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. There's lots of reasons why people get divorced, but uh, this fear and this idea that autism is this thing that's been added onto your child, and so then naturally that's going to condition you to want to train every sign of it out of your kid. It's
Yeah.
giving those parents who already don't have enough resources, who are already being failed by the medical system and often failed by their schools as well. It's giving them the wrong goal in mind and the wrong set of tools, which means they're going to agitate their kid by dragging their kid into bright, loud places, by forcing their kid to make eye contact, all the ABA stuff,
Having them
and
on
by
those
having
weird ass diets.
right, but yeah,
Yeah.
making them eat all this weird, unfamiliar food, trying different medicate, just trying all kinds of different treatments. It's introducing all of this stress and pressure into the autistic kid's life that makes the kid act out more, have more meltdowns, be more miserable,
Yeah.
and obviously that's hell for the parent too. And we can make fun of some of those
Think how
parents,
much it costs for them, like
and it's yeah, it's
treatments,
I,
billing, medical debt.
I just yes, I wanted to.
right.
I we were talking about it. I had to bring, to bring
Oh
this
yeah.
all that weed I'm buying. Anyway,
Thank you.
that
I'm
was
so
that's
glad
one
you
of
had
my
that.
I literally like a second ago we started talking about that, and I was like, I gotta find this. So.
I gotta pull up all that weed I'm buying. Oh my god, you did it. You had it at the ready. But but yeah, and these hucksters, and that's why they're a population that is really appealing to. And there's a whole podcast on this conspirituality or
Yes.
conspiritualists.
Yeah.
The spiritualists who are also conspiracy theorists. People mentioned Goop and Gwyneth Paltrow in the chat, and even though I did have an article about unmasking autism on Goop, so I'm trying to swim
They
against
cut
the
out-
tide.
They cut out all the stuff about furry shit, which we're just so
They
mad
cut out
about.
a lot of things, but I was glad they're at least it's not enough of a corrective, but whatever, it was there.
You platformed
but
Gwyneth Paltrow. That's
I
what you did.
How
platformed
dare
Gwyneth
you.
Paltrow.
I
That's
should
what I did. This is
cancel
my
you,
fault.
yeah.
Cancel
But-
me. Added to
but-
read it in the cancel book. But but yeah, so they're a really easy mark, and they're also really like because when people are desperate and lonely, you can siphon so much energy and money off of them, and
Right.
also lead them to
That's
these political movements.
that's where
Like,
I have also a very little patience. Like, I mean, obviously the political movements, yeah, but like the people who actively make money off these
Right.
people who are desperate, those to me are like the worst kind of
Yep.
actors because you need to continue to feed them bullshit for you to continue to make a dollar, and that to me I just have no patience for whatsoever.
Yeah.
Because like a lot of it's funny. Like I remember I was at a I was visiting with my sister one time, and we saw we stopped to have lunch one time, and then she saw a puzzle piece on a decal, and she's like, "I'm sure you probably don't like that." I was like, "Look, I have my problems with it," but I was like, "Look, this person's trying to do the best that they can." They probably saw this on Google, and like, if I had the opportunity to talk with them, I'd say like, "Hey, where'd you get the puzzle piece from?" Like, you know, who in your family or who's your loved one who's on the autism spectrum? Well, a lot of autistic people don't like that. Have problems with this, and did you know that Autism Speaks really doesn't spend a lot of money on researching services? Like, you can go hard on them. But like, and some people look, they do deserve to be dunked on, But like, but there are other people who like, you can reach that. Like I would like, and Devin, you probably get as many emails about this stuff as I do. Um, you, I would say like 90% of people who initially go into other types of movements, whether it's vaccines or autism speaks or things like that, they're movable
mm-hmm.
if they because they were that was just the first thing they were exposed to.
Right.
And, like there are some who are just so in too deep, or they made a profession out of it, or all that. So like that 10% you're not going to reach, but like 90% of these people really want the best for their kids. It's so funny, and Devin, you probably do. Is how we get billed as anti-parent. But like
Mm-hmm.
ironically enough, I think the good thing about neurodiversity and unmasking is it takes a weight off of the parent's shoulder. It
Yes.
frees the autistic person, but it takes the because then you no longer have to expend all this money on these expensive treatments. You no longer are blamed with like, oh, have you tried doing this for your kid? Have you tried doing that? Have you tried X, Y, Z, things like that? It's like no, then it's like, okay, there are these systems in place that are stacked against you. How do we fix it? How do we give you the resources?
I
How do we do all these things? The fact that the Individual Disabilities Education Act, the federal government's only funded about 15% of that, and it's 30 years old. It's
Mm-hmm.
older than I am. Only by a few months. That is unacceptable when the federal government's supposed to shoulder 40% of it. So, like, what it does and what unmasking and what neurodiversity does is it absolves, it no longer makes people blame themselves, and then it says like, okay, there are these things that are happening, how do we make it so that things are easier for everybody and collectively pull it together.
Yeah.
Right.
You said that that person said when they had an autistic child that it felt like a gun to their head, and I'm like, I mean, I get it because that's
I get it
society.
too.
Like that's fucking
Mm-hmm.
society. That is the same gun that we all have to our heads, but it's so magnified by disability, and and
Yes.
it's
Mm-hmm.
and especially trying to care to caretake for somebody with a disability that it's just like there's no solutions out there. There's no good
There are.
fucking help.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Parenting
I
is
mean,
already isolating. Sorry, go ahead, Eric.
no, parenting is isolating. Like,
Yeah.
there's a reason why every mom I know, my mom included, had postpartum depression.
Yeah.
It's a real thing, and it's like, and like, I'm not diminishing the actual mental effects of pregnancy and postpartum and things like that, but how much is it magnified? But like, imagine having postpartum depression and then not having the resources to address it. Like, of course, postpartum is going to be even more devastating. So like, I'm not diminishing that postpartum is a real thing and it's a clinical thing, but it's even magnified even more when you have all these problems with these problems with parenting to begin with, and how much we really don't give moms a fighting chance. Jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We live in a way more isolated society than a lot of different ways that humans have lived and raised children historically.
Right.
There's obviously endless different ways that families have looked and that child
Of
rearing has
course, of
looked, but
course.
people have we're just really reliant upon cars. A lot of people are raising kids in homes just without close proximity to other caregivers who have an ongoing kind of continuous relationship with the child. And when you add to that the stigma of I can't bring my kid out in public because people are going to stare at me because the kid is, doing echolalia or something that is completely harmless and in a less
Having
ableist
a meltdown.
society would not be it doesn't have to be isolating, and it would be, if the world was more accessible, you would be less isolated. um, and that's something that came up too in preparation for our talk today. We all read a profile in, was it The Atlantic, of
Atlantic,
Robert F.
yeah.
Kennedy? Yeah. Talking about how a lot of these anti-vax movements have, and conspiracy theory movements in general, thrive on isolation and a
Yes.
vacuum of meaning. And so when
Yeah.
people, feel like they're
There's a
doing
reason.
everything on their own,
There's
it's
a
really easy to
reason
prey on.
anti-vax sentiment went up during COVID when we were all at home. You
Hmm.
know, when you're alone, and you are kind of left to your devices, and then the algorithm in YouTube or TikTok or whatever you just keeps on feeding you stuff. And yeah, of course it happens that way. And in the same way, like as he said, anytime that there are these isolating moments. I mean, I think that's also one of the reasons. And I know that we were going to talk about masculinity. We want to talk about it. It's like I think a large reason why so many autistic people, because like a lot of people have asked me, like what about autistic people who are incels, or like a lot of people who stormed the Capitol on January 6th, like they've used
Hmm.
autism as a defense. And I'm just like, look, I live in Washington, D.C. I'm autistic. I've never wanted to storm the Capitol. But like,
Right.
Fake autistic.
um, yeah, autistic. Yeah, no, I need to give up I need to give away I need to give up my Amtrak pass.
Yeah.
But
No more trains for you.
but like the point that I made is that like no, it's like it makes sense that if you are autistic and your society ostracizes you, it's easy to understand how something like 4chan or any of these other god awful cesspools can offer an alternative and an outlet. What's interesting is I remember in 2014, no, in 2015, I read a profile, about a lot of young men who were recruited for ISIS, and a lot of them were on the autism spectrum.
Hmm.
Maybe I'll drop it in the chat, and it was fast. But I was just thinking to myself, oh, like there was the one thing which was like just the visceral disgust of it, but then also I was just like, but then like being autistic and like you think these things, and I was like, oh, that kind of makes sense. Like if you're isolated and if you don't have these things, so like so like when we talk about how so many autistic people wind up at things like the Proud Boys or Patriot Front or wind up storming the Capitol, we really have to ask ourselves. It's easy. It's so easy to just say, well, they're autistic. What do you expect? But the
Hmm.
deeper question is, well, like, why do we isolate so many autistic people? And
Right.
that's a much harder question.
Yeah,
um,
and the flip side of that is that autistic women get recruited into like turf groups, and a
Yes.
lot of them again have the same pipeline of like witchy spiritualism and things
right.
like that to transphobic beliefs.
I
Sorry, I
Yes.
cut you off, Maddie. What were you gonna say?
No, it's okay. I have to bring up this piss course because I got it. Is 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 DeSantis autistic? You're the
Yes.
political
Okay.
Oh
So you
you're the
gosh.
discussed this.
political guy, and we're talking about
Okay.
autism
Okay.
and masculinity. We
Okay.
gotta
So
talk
Oh
this
about
is the
this.
thing.
boy.
So like
Yes.
I've actually covered Ron DeSantis when he was a congressman, and
Oh yeah.
I was actually covering him last week when he was speaking at the Values Voters Summit or the Faith and Freedom Conference, and then earlier this month when he was in North Carolina. It was really funny because when I was in North Carolina, he was he was the keynote speaker for the Friday speech, and literally the day before Trump got indicted. So like people liked him, but
Wow.
like people were just like, look, I like to say. I was talking with voters, and they're like, look, I kind of like DeSantis, but like I'm behind Trump. Trump getting
Right.
indicted just like sold too many people over Trump. But like what's funny is that like so a lot of people have asked me like what's funny is that like before this started reaching the mainstream, a lot of some Republican aides and some other journalists asked me like, hey, is because like they now know me as like the autism guy. They're like,
Right.
hey. Is Ron? And it's like, you've never
Ron
been
to
kind of curious
Spectrum.
about this.
Is he?
You, yeah,
Okay, this is gay. What is if this is gay?
this
This. Yeah.
now
I was
is,
like,
Is
okay,
Ron DeSantis a little?
Is he a
We can do it.
little-
We can do it.
So bad.
um, but like no, but like so like this had entered, and then what happened was like I think in like March of 20 of this year, Peggy Noonan in the Wall Street Journal, who's Reagan's speechwriter, had a column where she said like some people have speculated that DeSantis might be on the spectrum, and I was like, long drag of a cigarette.
Yeah.
um, but like, but I was just
Ben
like,
Affleck.
okay. But here's my feeling about it. I don't care if Ron DeSantis is on the spectrum. More likely than not, we've already had an autistic president, Richard Nixon.
Ooh.
No,
Yeah.
seriously,
Oh,
go back and read
man.
some bios of Richard Nixon and tell me he wasn't autistic.
Yeah.
I'm just that's that's my pet theory, because like what happened is that he would need a list of cards of things to say before he would go to any public events, and he would have trouble making eye contact. But like I'm not far be it from me from to armchair diagnose, and I think in some ways it's irresponsible. But like what was funny was when I like Richard Nixon's always been kind of my special interest, because like growing up, and this is a diversion. I grew up in
We love
in-
diversions.
like,
Take it.
going to Whittier, California, which is where my grandmother lived, and we used to pass by Whittier College, which is where Richard Nixon went, and like being that like I was going to be the one, like my sister and I were going to be the first in our generation to go to college, like it was always kind of like, you know, my mom would tell us like that's where Richard Nixon went to college, like it's like you could go to college like Richard Nixon. So like but like was it but like so he's always kind of been a fascinating figure for me because of that. And then my dad became a Republican because Nixon ended the draft, and like he always told me Nixon ended the war in Vietnam, but like he didn't tell me that like he sent a lot of troops before and he bombed Cambodia before. It wasn't until I learned about it later. But like but like yeah, we've probably had autistic members of Congress. I mean, autistic presidents, and yeah, there are some times where like when I'm on the Hill and I'm talking to members of Congress, and I'm just like, are they?
I'm getting a little.
My is there I shouldn't be the one to say this, but is there Tismdar? Is that a thing?
Is there tism?
We give you permission to say it, but like, but not like, I mean, but like, it was, but like, you know, it was, but like, so, but the larger question about is Ron DeSantis autistic or not? I don't care. My answer to that, and Devin and I talked about this to Politico magazine. I don't care if he's autistic or not. What I care about is, because like, look, I've met autistic conservatives. You know, if you go to any libertarian conference, for God's sakes, like half the people there are autistic. If you go to a lot of, I mean, if you're in, if you talk to Republican data scientists or pollsters, a lot of them are, you know, I'm guessing on the autism spectrum. There's some who I've wanted to like say, hey, do you think it might be on the spectrum? But
Here's
like,
a book you might want to read. Don't
Yeah.
don't worry that I was the one that wrote it.
We're not broken.
Trans people aren't coming for your children. I am. But like, the point being is that, but like, you know, my whole feeling is like I don't really care about whether Ron DeSantis is autistic or not. I care about like what's his policy on Medicaid, because a lot of autistic people are on Medicaid. I
Yeah.
care about like, you know, let's also talk about, you know, the fact that he's signed laws restricting gender affirming care when like, if you know, you know, how many trans people are autistic, you know, like that to me is much more. If we're gonna have a discussion about Ron DeSantis and autism, let's have a discussion. But let's say like, okay, how is a President Ron DeSantis going to be for autistic people? And we have a good test lab because he's been a governor. So like, so my whole thing is like, and so, but to answer a lot of people's questions, like I've covered him as a congressman. Personally, I don't think he is. Like, is he awkward? Yeah, but like so many politicians are awkward, and that's why they have speechwriters and why they have people who pick out the right suits for them and the right this and that for them, you know. But it never tracked for me, but even then it would be immaterial for me if he were.
Right. And that's kind of the problem of like so many people just come to a lot of these questions with like representation brain of that it would be some kind of up for autistic people, period.
More gay prison guards, like that kind of thing.
Well, like, because there is an openly autistic state representative in Texas, Briscoe Cain, state senator, who is like a right-wing zealot, like who literally flew to Pennsylvania to dispute the election results.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
like,
So it's like
So like, yeah, and he's been named by Texas Monthly as one of the worst state senators in Texas, and I'm like, is I'm not as down on representation as other people might be, but I'm just like more than that. Like I tend to think that like if you see something, then that makes you more likely to see that that's a possibility. I also
Sure.
think that like some people bring experience that they otherwise wouldn't. I know Jessica Benham really well. And I think she's used her experience as an autistic woman and that's informed her policymaking in Pennsylvania. She's the first openly autistic state representative in Pennsylvania. But like you said, the represent that leads to these questions about representation. But more than anything, it's like, I when I've seen this because now what's interesting is that it's no longer becoming this thing that even like what's funny about it is that the people who are promoting it aren't liberals like about DeSantis. It's Trump supporters who are like looking for dirt on him.
Yes.
It's Steve Bannon who's promoting it. It's
Yeah.
Laura Loomer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that fits in Trump's whole legacy of always being very openly ableist on a whole
Yes.
level beyond what you see in your kind of standard Republican.
Yeah. So it
Um,
does. Yeah.
yeah. But there is a weird flip side to it that I'm forgetting the name of the Politico reporter that interviewed both
Michael
of us
Schaefer.
about this.
Schaefer.
Yeah, Michael Schaefer. He brought
I'll
up how
bring
he
that.
had
I'll bring that
seen.
up and put the article in the chat too.
Oh, beautiful! Thank you so much. He talked to me about how he had seen some alt right posters on 4chan saying, oh, it's a good thing if DeSantis
Yeah.
is autistic because then that means that he can be cold blooded enough to do some of the evil things we want him to do.
Yeah. And
And
like.
and 4chan is an autistic website. Like
Oh.
there's
Self
Oh.
self-identified as.
Yeah.
yes, it's
Yeah, no, like one of my friends asked me like, "What's the most autistic place on the internet?" And I was like, "I hate admitting it, but 4chan, man."
yeah, Reddit, 4chan, yeah. Tumblr's a different kind of autism,
It's a
but
different flavor, yes.
yeah, it's a
It's
different
girl
flavor.
autism. I'm sorry.
It's
It's girl
it's
autism.
literally Oppenheimer versus Barbie
Yeah, yeah. It's like I don't know why, but Oppenheimer is a boy movie and Barbie is for the she those.
meme.
I have no idea why. Never.
I can't explain it. But yeah, I really love Eric how you talk about like the alt right and like incels and like people pinning that on autistic people and how like it's not that there isn't a correlation there. It's not that there isn't some some trends, but like people equate it to oh because you're awkward you're going to do this thing. First of all, not all autistic people are awkward. Some of us like systematize being chill.
Yeah.
Like that's some people's real like
Hi,
ability.
Simon.
Yeah. Yeah. So like one, you can't that's not equating like, oh, this person's awkward, they must be autistic with DeSantis and whoever else. First of all, that's wrong. But it is true that as a class, autistic people are isolated and marginalized and preyed upon by a lot of these movements.
Yeah.
But you're not going to make that better by saying, "Oh, you're a member of the trench coat mafia. We hate you. You're evil." That
Yeah.
is going to create the kind of problem that you're worried about, and it's
Yeah.
been happening since Columbine that we've been doing that
Yeah.
to people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that was the point that I was making with that. I mean, you see some of Elon's biggest defenders, and let's talk about Elon as much as I don't like to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
It was inevitable it'd come up in this
uh,
conversation.
fine. Let's talk. Anytime people ask me about Elon, I'm just kind of like, fine, we'll do it.
Yeah,
But I'm going
he
to complain about it.
sucks.
But
Yeah.
but okay, let's talk about Elon. Like a lot of his defenders, some of them are on the spectrum, and some people, and even like some of his neurotypical defenders are like, oh yeah, him being autistic is why he's a genius or things like that. And I'm just like, look, I know a lot of autistic people, myself included, and we ain't fucking geniuses. Second of all, second
Yes.
of all, Elon, I mean, he hasn't necessarily invented a lot of things. He's just gotten a lot of. I mean, he's kind of the Thomas Edison of our time in many ways, just getting patents and co-opting companies. Third of all, it's like. Like ascribing it being autistic to being some kind of special sauce is, in my opinion, just as ableist as saying, "Oh, all Asian Americans are going to get into medical school,"
It's dehumanizing.
yeah, it's stigmatizing and it's creating a model. It almost makes us kind of the model minority kind of thing, which is like, And I have a lot of friends who are Asian American who hate those stereotypes. So in the same way, it's like, I mean, and ironically enough, Elon is one of Ron DeSantis' biggest boosters, and he hosted a forum with Robert F. Kennedy that I had to listen to for work, and I am never going to get those 2 hours back. But it was just it was such, but like, I think ascribing someone's skill set to them being autistic is kind of it's kind of laughable, especially
Yes.
if they're autistic themselves. But like, yeah, like I mean, because like I had heard rumors and rumblings about Elon being autistic long before he came out on SNL. It was funny, like I was watching those clips on SNL. I was on my phone late at night, and I was just like, and when he said that he had Asperger's syndrome, which like, there's a whole other thing. But like, I was just like, oh God. It's that meme of, ah, shit, here we go again.
Yeah. Oh God. Maddie, I do have a Grimes report. Now that we're saying this, I
Oh
do have a
my
Grimes report.
god. Oh my
Yeah.
god. We've almost never.
Yes. Speaking of,
Yeah.
and I won't go into this in much detail, but she has said openly that X their baby has been diagnosed as well.
Oh, okay.
Oh wow.
So yeah, so
How
that's
old is their baby?
oh
He's got to
gosh,
be
is he
like
like
three now,
three?
because like
Yeah,
this
he's like
2020.
three.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
I don't know
and
why that's.
Grimes has talked about being autistic herself at various points and all these different
Yeah.
things.
Oh my
But
god.
yeah,
What since we did the bumper, could we very very briefly talked about how there that interview clip where she was like somebody was like the interviewer was like yeah, we're fighting the patriarchy, and she was like,
I like the
well,
patriarchy. The patriarchy gave us roads and phones. Yeah,
she's like, well,
again,
actually,
she's
the patriarchy is good.
no, she has gone on that pipeline to like trad wife, and
Yeah.
again, all of these things are
Yeah.
intersecting with each other. But yeah,
Yeah. Oh man, I've seen things you could never unsee. Like,
Y- yeah, it's so how was the Elon Robert F Kennedy? Was it another Twitter Space kind
it was a
of
Twitter space.
candidacy
Yes.
announcement? Yeah,
Yes.
what?
Yes.
So I was there for the DeSantis one, which was botched and a shit show.
Yeah.
I did not listen to the Robert F Kennedy Jr. one. Can you
So like,
tell
I
us
will.
about this?
Before you start talking about that, I do want to interrupt just to say that this quote was in the that Atlantic article. He said
Yeah.
that
I
he
hate how
believes
right he is.
2024 will quote be decided by podcasts, and I know he's a bad guy. He's got a lot of bad opinions, very toxic beliefs that I think are really bad. But you gotta hand it to him.
He's right.
Maybe he's not so bad as a person doing it like a podcasty thing. Maybe
heartbreaking,
it's
the worst
good.
person you know. Heartbreaking,
Yeah.
the worst person you know made a great point.
It's at least a point I want to be true as a sort of a
Oh
podcasty
God, I think
person.
it's true, and I don't want it to be true. I think it's demonic.
no. If podcasts are deciding the election, we are fucked.
Yeah. It's worse than Twitter deciding an election.
Yeah, oh my god, no, like I mean, 2016 was in many ways the Twitter election. I mean, because we had a serial tweeter become president. Uh,
Trump is many things, but bad at posting is not fucking one of them.
No.
no, I have said this before, and people get mad at me, but I'm just like, look, the difference between Trump and DeSantis, having covered both of them, is Trump is hilarious.
He's got the fucking juice.
Yeah.
No,
got the
But-
swag.
But I interrupted. Let's go. I want to get back to what was that terrible podcast?
Yeah, so
of
that
Elon
space, like,
and-
it was because like what happened is that like Elon, of course, he didn't really push back on anything, but like he talked a lot. What was fascinating is that like, and this goes to the point that I wanted to make about RFK Jr., which is that he started out like talking about the government has been in debt, politics have been in bed with the pharmaceutical companies for a long time. And this is a point that I made on Twitter the other day. Like, you will never find the whole funny thing, because like I've been accused of being a stooge for the pharmaceutical industry, and I'm just like, do you realize who hates the pharmaceutical industry more than anybody else? People with disabilities.
Yeah.
They hate pharma with a passion because like they make drugs inaccessible, as we've discussed. But point being is that like, and then so like what he did is he actually like he has this really not unlike Donald Trump, this ability to start out with this thing that sounds really reasonable, and then goes off into that point. So it's this really logical, it's this really easy flow of how he goes into talking about that, and then he says like, okay, this is why we haven't had these tests for vaccines, we haven't had these tests for this, we've had these expert, and it's that is the stream of consciousness that he goes into is starting with something, and again, because like the way that he got into it we got into the vaccine thing was, of course, obviously his environmental activism. But the other thing that I was talking about with Michael Hobbs, and he highlighted for me, Michael Hobbs, if you're wrong about, he said is that like he started out largely with food allergies, like because his son I think has food allergies, and then he said that like food allergies might cause people to might be caused by vaccines. So like again, it's like one of the things that because he talked because he if I remember correctly he began largely by talking about river pollution, and
Mm-hmm.
that's one of those things where
Yeah.
again mistrusted institutions, and that was kind of the thrust of that Atlantic piece, and I recommend people go read it. Is like he's really running for president on the premise of people not trusting institutions,
Right.
and so it makes sense that someone like Elon, who likes to borrow a phrase from Steve Bannon, flood the zone with shit. That's a literal Steve Bannon quote.
It's a really good quote.
Wow.
Would platform someone like RFK Jr. Who wants to cause distrust, who promotes actively distrust in institutions. Um, I think a lot of liberals are thinking that conservatives are promoting RFK Jr. to rat fuck Biden, and that's
Mm-hmm.
part of it. But it's more that they don't want is that Steve Bannon says he wants the destruction of the administrative state, and like RFK is a facilitator of that. And it's just as much about getting rid of the administrative state as it is screwing over Joe Biden. But okay, but I never, but like, so that was the point. But then like it got really into the weeds, and that was when he started blaming like psychotropic drugs like Prozac for the rise in school shootings, which is a whole
Oh,
other version of
that.
liberalism.
Oh my God. Again, that dates back to Columbine. Like, come
Yeah,
on,
it does.
Jesus.
So,
There
um,
was a tidbit in there in the at that Atlantic piece about what was it that he uh his wife of his committed suicide when they were like uh they
Divorcing
yeah they were
or separating.
they were like separated and in the process
separating,
of
yeah,
divorce and in the process of divorce, and it's like there's just so many implications there because that was like an aside in the article, and I'm like there's a lot of
yeah, well,
implications there that I are wild.
yeah, I almost wanted to message because when I read that part, I almost wanted because John's a friend. Like I almost wanted to like message John. I was just like, you can't just drop that bomb and just move on from it. This
Right. What's the backstory, dude? What was?
like, come on,
Yeah.
that warrants at least another 500 words, dude.
Yeah.
But I understand he was under time constraints, and look, I've had editors, and I understand. But like,
Cut things.
that,
Yeah.
but yeah, like that was, but it was this. But yeah, like that was the thing, and like it makes sense that for someone like Elon, who a just likes to just now troll people, um, to promote that, and then but then B,
Mm-hmm.
I think that because Elon is somebody who his real really a lot of people forget his real red pilling. A lot of people point out his trans daughter and things like that, but like his real thing was really when he didn't like places being closed during COVID because Tesla's
Mm-hmm.
factory
Yep.
had to be closed during COVID.
Right.
That was really the beginning of his being red pilled. It wouldn't surprise me that he would be promoting someone like RFK Jr. because like he's saying that like COVID's not like this thing and like vaccines but like yeah, I mean it was really rambling, and like the point is that like what happens is that like so I started out by saying that like RFK Jr. starts on these really reasonable premises, but then like what happens is that like you're by the time you're like 5 minutes into him talking, you are like, what the fuck are you talking about, dude?
Right.
And I have a pretty high tolerance for conspiracy stuff because like I spend a lot of time following this stuff.
Yeah.
And I think another thing with Elon platforming this, like the DeSantis announcement, half of it was basically an advertisement for Twitter. Like
Yes.
Elon was so puffed up on the fact that this was the first presidential candidacy announcement taking place on Twitter Spaces, and so he really wants to obviously inflate his sense of importance. So and it works out very conveniently for him that the two non-Biden, non-Trump people running for office right now, the two people who will talk to him, are people that are also kind of happen to also be sympathetic to a lot of his viewpoints
Yeah,
anyway.
exactly.
But yeah, it's also all an extended Twitter ad and bid to make
It's
it
really funny
relevant.
how Trump got reinstated at Twitter and hasn't come back.
He just
That
said,
shit
"Screw
is
you."
so fucking funny. Like,
No, Trump is many things. Petty is one of them, and I almost respect it.
Yeah, I love. I mean, yeah, it's like it's a baby fights. You know, it's great when you're two. You know, it's Alien versus Predator. It's you know like it's
if
great to see them fighting each other. You know,
let them fight. Yeah.
let them fight.
Let them fight.
I
No,
I wish I
literally
wish
is.
Trump wasn't like Trump is a terrible person that is hurting our country, but I wish he wasn't. I wish he was drill. I wanted to just put him in a zoo and just because he's so funny and it's so hard.
No, no.
Like
I
I
said
just
like I said like I said that like if Trump could just tweet about Diet Coke, the rest, like how he used to
And
before he ran
Kristen
for president.
Stewart and Robert Patterson and shit.
Kristen Stewart. No, he was an amazing poster. He
Yes.
was.
I've heard someone say that he really just wanted to be a stand-up comedian. He wanted to go have a
Yes,
big
somebody.
audience, cheer and laugh, and if he had just gotten to do that instead, we would have been in a very different place.
yeah.
It's funny because like one of my jobs early, like during Trump's presidency, was I was on the morning shift. So like just basically a lot of that was looking at Trump's tweets, and like it was funny because like so when Trump lost his Twitter account, I remember thinking there were so many times where I would just think to myself, man, the Trump tweet about this would be hilarious. Like when the whole GameStop thing happened. Like, could you imagine him tweeting about GameStop?
Oh.
Him trying to understand what it is, like,
So,
it would be
like,
very fun.
like Barry trying to explain to his dad what GameStop
Yeah,
is.
another
Oh.
autistic king, Baron.
Yeah, yeah.
Our king. Yeah.
Like I'm not gonna touch that with with the 10-foot pole, but like, I mean, I know that there are rumors on the internet, but like
But you
the,
won't
like,
deny it. You won't. Yeah.
well,
I should say he went to a school that a lot. It's like a private school that a lot of like
yes.
autistic people in that region go to. We don't actually.
Yeah, in the
go there.
DMV, yeah, it's well
Oh,
known
okay.
place for people on the
Yeah.
spectrum,
Also.
like
Yeah.
autistic people go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
like I won't set like my whole thing is like I'm not gonna I don't want to explore it, but like yeah, but like because like I feel like he's a kid, he's not like he's not like
Hmm.
Don Jr. or Ivanka or Jared or any of them, but
Absolutely.
beside the point, it's just like but like I said, like can you imagine him tweeting about GameStop? It would have been hilarious. But then like the flip side is, could you imagine him tweeting during the George Floyd verdict? Jesus. Um,
Oh Lord, how much more could he have,
These
incited? Like
beautiful,
that's the
these
flip side.
beautiful
Yeah.
police officers.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
um,
His weird compliments. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, no, our big beautiful like when the stock market was taken, like our beautiful markets are being destroyed. Um, no, no. Like I said, if he could just tweet it, like if Elon just let him tweet, let's say, like you can't tweet about politics, you can tweet about Diet Coke, Kristen Stewart, LeBron James, like yeah, by all means.
Right. Yeah. Just siphon it out.
Um,
Um, One thing that you mentioned, Robert F. Kennedy talking about during the Twitter Spaces that jumped out at me was the like claiming that food allergies were caused by
Yeah, well,
vaccines.
that's the origin of how he started it. That yeah, like that
Right.
wasn't on the space, but like that's basically from like how he started with how he went down that road. Yeah,
Right. And it's another one of those things where it's like there's this garbled misunderstanding of truth, which is that overprescription of antibiotics is related to
yes,
development of food allergies and why we see more. One
yes,
of the reasons why we see more food allergies in
yeah,
kids today.
exactly. Yeah. So again, it's a gross misunderstanding of like what actually happened.
Right, and a real reflection of like there are ways in which the medical system has failed, and one thing that I talk a lot about is just changing how we access pharmaceuticals and informed consent for drugs. And one of the things that people always come back with as kind of a clapback against that is what about people misusing antibiotics? There's this idea that it's an individual problem where individuals are demanding antibiotics and overusing them when again, just because of the nature of how the healthcare system works, people get prescribed antibiotics sometimes from a clinic where they've just stopped in and the doctor doesn't know what's going on with them, and then they haven't been given enough instructions to maintain their course of antibiotics and to know why it's
Yeah,
important. And so then you have antibiotic resistant tuberculosis and things like that popping up more and more. And so it's like we have a real healthcare crisis on our hands caused by a lot of lack of access, lack of continuity of care, not
yeah,
having time with a doctor who will actually diagnose you and explain to you why it's important to take all of your medication even after you're feeling better. Just all of these things that fall through the cracks. It leads to public health issues, and then people pin it on the wrong thing. And that's
Yeah,
where we get, because they don't know any better, and so it like, and because they're opportunists like feeding
yeah,
on that
yeah,
misconception, and so it's just,
absolutely. Yeah.
it's just so endlessly frustrating to me,
Right.
to see.
And the way that like yeah I see that with I saw that with my mom, you know, like I know that a big part of um Ben's illness was GI stuff, and that's actually eventually what how he passed away was because of GI stuff that
Oh.
we didn't even know about. And so it's like my mom went all on all these things. Like my brother Ben was on an extremely strict diet for a long time for a lot of things, and it's hard to know like because I do think he had very serious GI distress, and I think that that was a huge part of
And a lot of
why.
autistic people do. Yeah.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right, and I think that that's a huge part of his distress was like GI related, and it's this weird thing where it's like Ben needed somebody to help figure out what like that stuff, and he never got it. And my mom tried. My mom she worked, she was a chef at a like a 5-star restaurant in downtown Detroit. And
Wow.
she was a head chef, and she talks about dreaming up the meals, literally dreaming the meals that she would
Wow.
like create for the next day at a I think it was a vegan 5-star restaurant in Detroit.
Hmm.
And so she, you know, she had some fucking, knows what she's doing, but it's like, I always wondered, like, where is the line between, like, what she was doing because of, like, there's so much fucking dietary grifting that happens. Like,
Oh my
clearly he
God.
needed help. Clearly he needed help. He needed to have a diet that was helpful for him. But also, I have, because of all of the different, you know, she subscribe to a lot of things like like anti-vax, like uh uh what is I always forget the name of it, the stuff that it's like uh
The
the
Mirasol?
no, the tinctures that it's like, it's just water
Yeah.
with like
Oh,
one
homeopathy.
homeopathy, right? Like she subscribed to all those stuff, and it's like, what was the deal with the diet stuff? Like, how much of that stuff is stuff like that, and how much of this stuff is like stuff that needed to be done for Ben? And there's no way
Mm.
to tell, and I don't think she had a way to know how to help Ben. And yeah, I think
Absolutely.
that's a lot of people's experiences,
It is a lot of people's experiences, more than we want to admit.
right?
Yeah, yeah, and just the comorbidity is a weird term because it's still like pathology paradigm, right? But just between autism and things like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, gastric issues, and it's something that like is not, people are getting to be aware of it, not from the pipeline of, oh, give your kid a gluten-free diet so they'll be less
No,
autistic, but just as
in many
a
ways, it's
legitimate
autistic self
thing.
advocates pushing for it. You know, it's like like a lot of people think that like when I say that, like when I mention how much we spend on biology research, they think that I say that I'm anti-biology. I'm not anti-biology. I want autistic people, and in fact, a lot of the reasons why we know things about like autistic people walking on their toes is from like autistic people understanding. It's like one of the things I want to understand is like. How do we stop so many autistic people with intellectual disabilities dying from epileptic seizures? Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's something I would love to learn the cure for. I'd love to learn the cure, like how to mitigate. What research and what biology research we need to discover like why so many autistic people suffer from heart disease. So
Mm-hmm.
I want there to be more understanding about biology. So
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And we have so little knowledge about the mechanisms of these things, whether it's just genetic linkages, because a lot of the research suggests that autism is probably, to the extent that it's genetic, it's multiply determined, where there's multiple different pathways you can end
yes,
up there. And like, so how much of this are certain genetics, correlating with it versus the intense, just like cortisol flooding your body at all times of being in a world that's not built for you, and just the
yeah.
physiological toll of that stress and not being able to communicate it. And it's just a really tricky thing to untangle.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting, Devin. You were talking about what is the term where you can't feel your own?
Alexithymia.
Yes, where
Yes.
and that so much of, where that recently was it that trans people also experienced that at similar levels? Was that the specific specificity of the study?
Yeah, yeah. It's a study that just came out in the journal Autism in Adulthood, finding that
Yes.
non-autistic trans people have a elevated risk of alexithymia, so not being able to tell how you're feeling, emotionally and bodily internal states as well,
Wow.
um, similar to autistic people. And the study authors from this concluded, oh, well, since we already know that transness and autism often go together, maybe a lot of these trans people are actually just subclinically autistic too. And for me, I want to take, well, let's take a step back here.
Right.
These are two populations that are told their bodies are wrong all the time. Maybe that's why they can't tell how they're feeling.
Right.
Like,
I think a lot about the ways in which um, being trans and being autistic or being is there's so much there's just like the way that society forces you to exist in a way that you shouldn't, the inherent trauma of growing up autistic or trans, and how there's so much overlap there, the way that like being autistic or like learning unmasking for autistic people, and like learning to present as your own gender is a similar thing to
Yeah.
unmasking, and just how our whole society, like to anybody with that is marginalized in any way, and like are forced that is a traumatizing experience, like no
It
matter
is.
what the minority is.
It is, and like on top of that, like I think one of the things that's interesting is like, look, I'm a boring cisgender heterosexual dude, but like what's funny
you're
is
not
that
boring. You're in a band.
but like, but like the point that I was making is that like it's funny when I hang out with my transgender friends, and then like they've talked about like it's funny like they have like some of them have different terms for unmasking, but like when they talk about like how they've learned to like come and accept them being like shedding all those layers, and I'm just like, oh, that's unmasking. We have different languages for it, but it's like, yeah, like it's the same thing, and it's endlessly fascinating. I mean, and like I mean, I almost like, I mean, if you go to, I mean, at Pride here in DC, you could throw stone. I mean, don't throw stones at trans people, but you know, throw a brick wall during Stonewall. Don't throw stones at trans people. But like you could throw a bottle cap and like at a trans gathering, and there would be and like you would hit an autistic person. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just like how the same way, like I'm in recovery. You know, and how God knows how many people in recovery are also neurodivergent. Um, and let's not even talk about how many neurodivergent people have eating disorders, something you and I have talked about,
Mm-hmm.
Devin. But like the point being is that it's just like it's almost to the point that like I have yet. I think I've only met like one trans person I know who wasn't autistic, uh,
Give it time.
or
We'll
Yeah.
get them.
neurodivergent in some way or the other.
Let me at them.
Did you ask
But
if they had ADHD? Because they probably
I should
Oh
have.
Lord.
But it was the only one trans person I know who, as far as I know, wasn't autistic, was the one I went on a date with. But other than that, like every other trans person I know is autistic in one way or the other.
Yep.
Just when you need some autism
Just
in
when you
the
need someone, the one time I like,
situation to
because
help
like I
grease the
usually only
wheels.
date neurodivergent people, but like that was
Right.
like the norm. That was like the one time I didn't date an ND person was when I dated a trans person.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, because they could probably relate at least to some of those.
Yeah,
Again, there's
yeah,
similarities. Yeah.
yeah.
And something that you've been posting about on Instagram stories too, semi recently, is just gender nonconformity and autism,
Oh
regardless
yeah.
of whether you're trans or not. That just like there's a higher degree of gender nonconformity in autistic men in general, or being punished for being failures of
Yeah,
masculinity sometimes. Like there's a
because
lot of interesting stuff there.
I mean, like, look, I mean, my dad is from Texas, um, and I grew up in a very, I don't want to say like Mexican cultures are more macho than any other cultures, but like I grew up in a culture where I grew up in American society, and so Mexican culture is just as macho as anything else. And like, but like I didn't have a lot of being autistic. I don't have hand-eye coordination for shit. So like I couldn't really play sports, and like it wasn't until later, the point that the story that I always talk about. And this is a really interesting story about masking. When I went to the University of North Carolina, I didn't know the only thing I knew about North Carolina basketball is that Michael Jordan played for North Carolina. I didn't know anything else, but I knew that all my friends liked North Carolina basketball. So I used to go to the games with them or go to bars and watch my. And then it got to the point that like now I've wondered to myself like, do I actually like North Carolina basketball, or do I just like, or do I like watching North Carolina basketball with my friend? I mean, you look right behind me. I got a North Carolina basketball poster. Um, do I like North Carolina basketball, or did I just get into it because I like it with my friends? Because like because like I've noticed that like it's very hard for me to go to a bar and watch North Carolina basketball just by myself. I have to usually watch it with other people. But like I think about that a lot because I think about like I mean because I think that on one end, like the whole reason why this kind of panic around autistic people being trans people transing autistic people, which even Elon's promoted, and like you've seen a lot of like in Elon aside, you've actually seen laws in places like Georgia and Ohio
Oh.
citing autism as a reason to prevent young minors from getting gender affirming care. Um, it's really corrosive even for the cisgender autistic people like myself because we also don't fit really neatly into the normal gender roles, things like that. Like, I just never got into that, into a lot of the things that like other guys did.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like, I'm glad I did it because I wouldn't be me. But like, I remember, but like, especially when I was in high school and in junior high school, just feeling like, is there something wrong with me because I don't that just didn't some of the things that my peers did just didn't appeal to me,
Mm.
and it still doesn't appeal to me, even nowadays there are things that guys do that just don't appeal to me.
Yeah, yeah, like I think like looking back for me, a big barrier to even realizing I was trans was that I just couldn't back then, to the extent people were aware of transness, it was a very binary, very straight cishet
Yeah.
kind of goal. And I was in special ed gym. I couldn't fucking catch a ruler when they would drop it in between my fingers in fucking special ed gym or like
and
catch a
now you're
ball
and
or
now you're
like
working out when you shouldn't be working out after top
I know
secret.
now and now I'm a
And now you're
Chad
jock.
Adonis,
Now
but
you're jock
Now you're a
filled.
jock. Fuck you.
yes.
You're
But
one of the
but and that's whatever. I'm overcompensating now in a different way. But like I really didn't. I had these weird rules for myself about things that I couldn't do and couldn't wear. Part because of just closeted bullshit, but like I really thought, wow, I'm so unathletic. I can't ever wear this cute athletic wear that I want to wear. That's like because I'm not athletic, and that would be like faking. And I'm
yeah.
like, I can't fit in these circles and things like that. And I can't be a man because I'm gay and because I'm both. I'm all the gestures. Um,
Yeah. um, yeah, no, that goes to. I hate to interrupt you, but it's kind of like it's like I joke with my trans friends. I'm like I always feel bad when my friends come out as trans mask, not because they're trans, but because they're joining the dudes. And I'm just like, do you
mhm.
really want to join us? It's not that great of a team.
Uh, and there certainly are a lot of trans masks who have that kind of baggage. I didn't have
Yeah.
that kind of baggage. If anything, and in fact, I think Trans Peaks, you asked me this once, something like if I had this baggage of like, oh, do I feel like I'm joining like the evil
Yeah,
oppressor's side or
yeah,
anything like
I'm
that?
obviously fucking with my friends, but yeah, no,
Right.
that is the
A lot
thing.
of
I've
people
noticed
feel
that
that.
a few of my mask friends have said that.
Yeah, but and I had to tell her that like for me personally that wasn't my baggage. I actually I'm everybody here knows I used to be a libertarian. I used to not be very like feminist at all. Like I felt very alienated from feminism when people were assuming I was a woman and I was not. And just a lot of the ways that just kind of mainstream like liberal white feminism talks about gender was very alienating to me. And so it was actually far easier for me to become more of a feminist and more just more open to a lot of different things once I accepted that I was more masculine,
Yeah,
because then, like so I never really saw those things as like the enemy for me, but I just saw it as like this amorphous thing that was really
it's
hard to
just
like
yeah. I mean,
reconcile, you know?
you and I have talked about this in the DMs because like I said that like I think that like one of the fascinating things for a lot of my friends who are trans because I think that for the longest time the platonic ideal for my friends who are trans was very similar to autism, which was that like for the longest time the platonic ideal for autistic people was that we present as neurotypical. And I think that for a long time, a lot of my trans friends, the platonic ideal was that you present as cis, you pass as
Mm-hmm.
cis. Like that's the highest thing to aspire to. But one of the things I've seen with a lot of my trans friends is that like it's not you don't want to aspire to be I mean, if you want to be cis, like look like you're cis, like by all means, but that's not what everybody wants. But like, it's to present the way you want to be and not be judged for it. Because like, I mean, I'm sure that like, and because like I asked you, like I think we were DMing one time, and I said like, were you when you realized you were a guy and you were beginning this transition, were there things that you looked at and you're like that us dudes do, and you're like, I don't want to do that shit, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and you said yeah, and that has been so fascinating to me because like I can imagine that like it's interesting to me that now transness is very similar to like neurodiversity in that sense, where it's like y'all don't want to be like me. And hell, I wouldn't want to be like me. I'm fucking. But it's like now you just want to be the best version of you. I think that's fascinating to me.
Right. Yeah, and I think we've in some pockets of society now, um, we have a little bit more of a pick and choose what elements of these things you want to be and
Certainly.
want to do.
And I
You
should
know.
say that like what's interesting is that when I moved to Washington D.C. when I was 20, when I was an intern, that was the first time I really knew a lot of gay people. You know, because I grew up in the suburbs of Southern California, a very conservative area in San Bernardino County. So, so like I just didn't know a lot of gay people. But what was funny is that by getting to know gay people, both as an intern and then when I moved here long term, and there's just a very lively gay community in DC. Um, that was oddly enough one of the things that helped me unmask my autism. And like the editor of the first magazine article I did about autism in National Journal, I'm Not Broken, which became the basis for the book. The editor of it was a guy named Richard Just, who's a gay man, and it was like I would talk. He would help me talk through it. He almost kind of shepherded me. That he brought that piece into the world, like as an editor. And so like it's funny how we kind of mutually beneficial benefit each other.
Mm. It makes so much sense to me because just like queer masculinity, like there's so much more room for softness and
Yeah,
for being like, and people will
tenderness
make fun of the Disney gays and I won't. Well, I will, but I'll lovingly make fun of the
for
Disney
a
gays.
different
Like,
reason.
Yeah.
yeah, like, you know, like I don't think it's all that bad and cringy. Like I think it makes me feel nice when I see these like 45-year-old bearded men with like a bunch of Funko Pops on their shelves and their like most favorite thing to do is like, you know, wear little mouse ears and like do these kind of tender like cute things because yeah, fuck it up. You know, my sister's got a whole wall of like thousands of Funko Pops, and like like it's very neurodiversity friendly, right? Because you're talking special interests, you're talking having interests and
Yeah,
hobbies that get written out as childish, right? And like
yeah,
having room for tenderness and playfulness, and that's certainly not all of the queer community. We've got a lot of baggage, but like in like more enlightened like queer spaces and like queer men's groups, like you see more of a celebration of that stuff, and I think that
yeah.
really
I mean,
benefits
yeah. I
disabled
mean,
people
like
too. Yeah.
last week or the week before, there was Awesome Con, not too far from where I live, which is the comic convention here in DC. And I was just like, look, I'm sure that if I went in there, I'm sure that I would see like most of the people there would be my people.
Mm-hmm.
And then that made me think like, wow, when I was a kid, I really liked comic books and I spent a lot of time. I wonder how many people in the comic book store that I used to go to were like I was hanging out with my tribe and I didn't even know I was, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and Steve Silberman writes about that in Neurotribes, how like the earliest fan fiction conventions, which were way pre-internet, way pre most people having phones in their houses, like people would
Oh
trade
yeah, the early
magazines
Star
and
Trek conventions, yeah.
people
Um,
would ride the rails back in the day to like Eric, if you're other Eric Boyd, if you're in the chat, my train our train enthusiast friend, people would ride the rails to literally meet other science fiction enthusiasts that
Wow.
they met through like mail order catalogs, and a lot of them
yeah,
were neurodivergent, almost certainly, you know, from what we know about them, and yeah, they built that
yeah. I mean,
infrastructure.
it's fascinating how you know, it is so funny how we kind of find ways to find each other because like I mean even today like some of my friends I didn't know that they were explicitly autistic or ADHD when we befriended each other, and now they've some of them have gotten their diagnosis and things like that, and I'm just like, oh yeah, of course we became friends. um, we do have a way of finding each other. Surprise, you want to hang out with people who are similar to you, like
Mm-hmm.
big fucking surprise there.
Yeah. And again, just such a huge overlap with queer identity too. There's
Oh
just so
God,
many
yeah.
gay comic book nerds, so many gay video
So many
game nerds,
gamers.
gamers with a Y. Yes,
Yeah.
like we were all looking to escape reality and also like get to author ourselves in our own stories in this beautiful way. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
those
absolutely. Yeah,
realms
it's
offer.
I think that that's one of the other things is that like that a lot of people, what other people would infantilize, you kind of now are in hindsight asking like, well, why would people immerse themselves into an alternate reality? Well, it's oftentimes sometimes it's an escape to be something you're not. Other times it's a way to be what you see yourself as and how you view yourself, and like it doesn't surprise me one bit. I mean, I think one of the things that we talk about, like how I didn't feel comfortable conforming into male gender roles. One of the things that I did feel comfortable doing, and one of the reasons why I was in bands a lot, was that I felt that that was the version of myself that I could unmask and be my full self. Was I didn't have those inhibitions that I did when I was on the playground, but like when I was on stage, I could be who I wanted to be.
Mm,
I gotta.
yeah.
I have to ask. So, is you're in a band? Can we plug the band? Is it online? We
So
didn't
right
get
now
that on
I'm
the
Yes.
doing
credit
this.
screen.
No, I'm doing this. So I'm doing this. I do this thing. This is a very neurodivergent thing, which is every month I do this thing called Flash Band in DC, which is like you speed date with other musicians,
Oh, that's
and then you
really
find a band, you
fun.
form a band, and then you play a show at the end of the month. So next week I'm playing a
Wow.
show, but yeah, so like I do
Oh.
that every month, and it's a low way for me to get back because for a while I stopped playing music, but then now I've like especially when I was writing the book and I was so busy. Now I'm doing that. That's what I do for fun. So
Is that
Mm.
that's Flash Band?
yeah, Flash Band DC. So like
Oh,
if
I've
you're ever in
never
the
heard
DC
of
area and
this
you're
as
a
a
That's
thing.
musician,
really fun.
it's so fun. It's the
Yeah.
most fun thing that I do these days.
Oh
So
my God, so many new potential homies
yeah, exactly.
to meet.
But yeah. So like that's the things that. But like I learned a lot. But like it's funny because like how we find ways to unmask. Like, instead of us infantilizing what people like, ask like in hindsight, it's like look, maybe they were trying to find the best version of themselves that they couldn't be in real life, or that we didn't allow them to be.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So do you find, because this is a thing I've heard many autistic people describe, that like when you're on stage or you're in a situation like that, it feels like, okay, I know what the scripts are. I feel more
Yes,
empowered to be more outgoing,
yes.
and that's freeing.
Yeah, so like the crowd stuff, like it's almost like because some people say, "Do you hate talking to crowds?" Like, yeah, crowds, but like at some point when I know, like nowadays when you and I do public speaking things, it's like, okay, I have a speech that I've prepared and I've done this, and I know how to do this and I know what the role words are. I know the role that I'm playing. So like when you and I were on stage, like, I didn't seem introverted whatsoever, and you didn't seem introverted whatsoever, or freaked out or worried. But that's just because I knew
Right.
what role I was playing. I had my talking points. I had things that I jumped off them occasionally, but like there was that set structure.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I relate to that immensely. Just like when I'm teaching, when I'm doing some kind of speaking engagement, it's like, oh, I know I'm actually supposed to be talking right now. Okay,
Yeah, exactly.
that's easy.
Right.
But the conversation afterwards, when people are mingling, like,
Oh
well, you're
gosh,
good at that though. You will just like walk up and say hello to people. I mean,
yeah,
you
yeah.
have to be for your
Like when
job.
you and I
It's
afterward when we were at NYU. Yeah, like
yeah. Were you always good at that, or did doing like DC reporting and did that just
a
like
little bit of both. Like
train it into
my
you?
mom says that I was always very personable when I was a
Hmm.
kid, and that. But then like but like I I almost say to an extent I needed to have things in common with people before because like when I was a kid, especially when I would move because we moved around a lot when I was a kid, like I was painfully shy. But like the moment I knew that I had something in common with people, then it was easier for me to relate to them. Um, so like when I moved to Washington D.C. when I was a White House intern, everybody else was interested in politics. So like it was easier for me to make friends that way. But like when I was living in Southern California and I was really kind of isolated, it was really harder for me. It was a lot harder for me to make friends.
Yeah.
Mm,
So
makes
I think
sense.
it's funny how what my mom saw versus what I see and how I view it. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how it looked to her versus how it felt. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of DC as like a whole city for people with the same special interests before.
no, no, I mean for God's sake, like, I mean if you go to the Pentagon or you go over to Langley or Quantico, like God, you'll find so many people on the spectrum.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I can
I mean,
believe it.
or like if
Geopolitics
you
is a special interest. Yeah.
yeah, or like I mean, God, if you go to like those like, I mean, so many. I mean, Devin, you know this because you see him on social media. You see me interacting with all these election nerds who like are like, 16, 17, and like will give you the exact polling data from like one county in Wyoming, and you're like, and then you're like, and then like you're like, oh yeah, you're autistic. There's a reason why I get along so well with these kids.
Yeah, there's no neurotypical explanation for this.
For these election kids, for
Well,
these election
yeah,
nerds.
I think about how Nate Silver has like whether he's autistic or not, I don't know, but like he was really into like baseball statistics, and
Yeah.
then
Oh,
and then
yeah.
went from baseball statistics to politics, and it's like, yeah, I mean
Yeah.
that's the kind of
Almost incidentally. Yeah.
right, that's like the special interest stuff where it's like, oh yeah, I
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
get really into
Absolutely. Like,
this
I mean,
thing.
I
Yeah.
mean, yeah. Like one of my favorite stats, like, the kids over at Split Ticket, like a lot of them are on the spectrum, and these kids, they beat the normal posters this last election, and like a lot of them are on the spectrum, or a lot of them are autistic, or at least neurodivergent in one way or the other. And it's like, yeah, like again, it's like. It's because these kids they don't trust things as conventional wisdom. They're like, wait, let's take a look and create our own data set. That's a very neurodivergent thing to do.
Mm-hmm. And it really jumped out to me back when I was still like studying political psychology and I was like visiting different political science departments and stuff. Like uh, how little many of those MFs understand human psychology, right? Like there's this like uh, this insistence on things need to be like rational, whether it's a
Yeah,
rational economic model or people should know the facts about this thing and having to break down for them like no, like that's not how most people vote, that's not how most people
that's how.
behave,
Yeah,
like
people vote based on vibes.
yeah, most people don't have a political ideology. Like
Yeah,
there's
yeah, yeah.
it, it,
I mean that was the thing that I learned when I started going to Trump rallies a lot of times. And
mhm.
at this point I've been to like way too many Trump rallies for me to count. So, you know,
Yeah, you get such a mishmash of vibes, emotional connections, branding, like
yeah,
people just regurgitating. Yeah, Phil Converse calls them non-attitudes, just like basically whatever you just heard most recently, you'll
yeah,
say that you believe sometimes, and we all do it.
yeah.
Not that like we're autistic, mastermind rationals or whatever. Like,
And no, no,
no,
we
we
do the
do
same.
it
Yeah,
too.
I do the same thing.
Yeah.
We all do. Yeah, like I mean, I think that like that makes me. I think I said that like because when some people ask me, and I think that some kids asked me when we were on that panel together, like say this does me being autistic make me a better journalist. I said I can't say that because I know that there are people who can run circles around me, but it does make me a different kind of journalist, and it makes me see things that I think other people wouldn't see. And I think
Hmm.
that being somebody who doesn't comply or doesn't find social norms to be a fluent language, that makes me want to explore things more and learn things more, or look at it through a different language. And I'm sure the same thing exists with you in academia.
Hmm. Absolutely. Or just even being willing to be a dissenting voice
Yeah,
sometimes, or not understanding things, which we also talked about on the NYU panel. Sometimes, if you're the person who's like,
yeah.
wait, why do we believe this?
We,
It
we did
forces
we
people
did
to
talk a lot
unpack.
about, yeah,
Yeah.
just the joy of not knowing.
Hmm. And forcing
Yeah,
people to unpack their assumptions because you're
yeah,
not taking
yeah,
something for granted for like some social reason or whatever. So sometimes that can have a lot of advantages too.
yeah. And that could be a whole fun thing. Just to you get some people angry, but you also get some people to be open to things.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, people definitely get angry about it.
And
I
you and I have made a lot of people angry over the years.
yeah.
Yes.
I was just thinking about how we've had in the past conversations about like um I don't know, this idea that like autism equals objectivity and like
No,
yeah, like and how one of the things that like there's you've talked Devin, you've talked about how like people will be like, well, autistic people can't lie or like like or like they're like they can't be fascist or whatever like
Yeah, they can't be racist because they're rational. They can't lie. But sometimes
man.
autistic people will say it. They'll be like, "We can't lie."
right.
It's like, whoa, okay, that's
Yeah, no,
convenient for
well,
you to
because like
tell people.
I remember Amy Schumer said that like because her husband's autistic, she says like my husband can't lie. I was like, I get what you're saying, but I was like, we can't lie, but we just kind of suck at it. Um,
Mm.
but
But if
like,
I rehearse it,
but if you rehearse it, yeah, if you give me like a day or two, like when I was an addict, like and I could rehearse my bullshit. Oh man, I nobody could lie better than I could.
hmm
And but
yeah,
I also am just thinking about how like this idea that like um another aspect to that that we've talked about like autistic people have this sense of justice, and so they can't, do stuff. And it's like, but then we talk about, people like Elon Musk and possibly uh, Ron DeSantis, where it's like that sense of justice can just as equally get you
Yeah,
to a fascist place as much as it.
or like, or what it does is that like your sense of justice is very sense shaped by what what you were exposed to and what the values that were instilled upon you were.
Mm-hmm.
That can vary. That is just as much of a role of it as well.
Right.
Yeah. 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 And oh my God, it's Eddie said in the chat, people completely misunderstand what black and white thinking means. It doesn't mean we're always actually like in the like right, or that it can't change. It's just a degree of like, I don't know, dogmatism isn't even the word either. It's just
I know what you're
our
trying to
reality.
say, and it's gonna bug me.
Yeah, it's like
But
it's less socially malleable from moment to moment the way
yeah,
neurotypicals are, but it still can change. It can still be
yeah,
biased. It can
like
still, all
yeah,
that
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, like I mean, I think the point that I always made is that like, cause like I always used to get really mad, um, because like what was funny was a lot of people. What's funny is that like during the Trump administration, when a lot of liberals were making saying like, "Oh, Trump is mentally insane," and I'd say like, I don't really, or they made fun of him because he couldn't walk down the
Hmm.
stairs and things like that. Like I said, like, look, this is ableist regardless, and it was
Yeah.
funny because like, what's funny because even MAGA people started giving me credit for that. But then now that I'm saying like, the idea that Joe Biden has dementia or things like that, that's just as ableist as well. And then some of those MAGA people are mad now, and I'm just like, no, I'm not. I didn't like it when because like you know, I don't have an agenda. I just don't like when people say that in general. Like I just, I like it really bugs me whenever anybody does it, and it's like it was the reason why I didn't like it when like you would see like especially during Trump's presidency, people say like, "Oh, Trump is gay for Putin," ho 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 ho, and
Right.
I was just like,
It's like
I was just
sick
like,
dunk. That's not
and
a
I was
bad
just,
thing.
and I was just like, no, okay, not only is this like, what are we in sixth grade, but also like it's still kind of you're still kind of low key being homophobic, you know, so. So like but like a lot of people would think I was being a party pooper, and like
Hmm.
and yeah, I have no problem being a stink bug at a garden party, but I wasn't trying to be a stink bug, you know.
Right. You just had a set of principles you had thought through that you could articulate and apply to two different situations equally, and that's
Yeah,
rattling for people.
yeah. So like, whatever, fine,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I have principles, and I just don't like when people like are being homophobic, whether it's liberals or conservatives. Sue me.
Right. Uh, and you also at the same time you have done some writing and reporting around just the question of what do we do when there is a lot of evidence that a senator is no longer like able to function at capacity
Yeah, with
like
Dianne Feinstein versus John
yeah.
Fetterman, like that was a
Mm-hmm.
really, I mean, God, I got so much heat for that, like from so many people, but like, and I still get heat for it because like my feeling has always been, um, reasonable. Like, if you can do, the question is always about whether you can do the job with or without reasonable accommodation, and I think a lot of people misunderstood me saying that John Fetterman versus Dianne Feinstein meant that I was caping for Fetterman. I'm not caping for John Fetterman. The thing that I was saying is that we have clear evidence that when he's given a speaking tablet, he can do the job. He isn't missing votes. He can ask questions in committee. He's not repeating himself. He may mush together words by virtue of him recovering from a stroke. But like I'll give you an example. Like I was in this is the most autistic story. Is that like a few weeks ago I was eating in in the basement of the Senate. There's a cafeteria, and I was just eating and checking my phone and things like that. And I didn't realize that the big giant guy in a sweater and shorts was Fetterman. And like I was like, oh, Senator. And like that's just such an autistic moment. But then like what's funny is that like I said like because I know his wife. I was like, oh, Senator, how's Giselle doing? And then like he's like, excuse me, I didn't understand. And then like his aide had his tablet with him, and he talked to the tablet. He says he asked how Giselle's doing. He's like, oh, Giselle's good. Thanks for asking. Like, and the point that I was trying to make is that like um, clear like he can do the job as long as like somebody spoke into his tablet and asked like said like yes, how's Giselle doing. The whole thing with Feinstein is that clearly It's an open secret that a lot of reporters don't ask her, didn't ask her questions because they knew she wouldn't be able to give an answer. What,
Wow.
just because of her declining state.
It's
And a lot
it's
of people.
it's elder abuse. What is happening to Diane
Yeah,
Sawyer?
Yeah, it's gruesome.
and then a lot of people also get on my ass whenever I because they're like a lot of liberals are like, why don't you tweet about Chuck Grassley? He's 80, he's 89. I'm like, yeah, because Chuck Grassley's all there. Like, look, he's a Republican. And you could disagree with his politics or say, but like, look, when you talk to the guy, like I've talked to Grassley a few times, and for those who don't know, Senator Chuck Grassley, he's 89 years old, he's a Republican from Iowa, and like what's happened is that a few times when like I've put my phone back in my pocket, he'll like, hey, wait, I forgot this other thing, and then he'll give me a fuller answer. And it's like, yeah, he's still there, like he's able to give me a response. But like it's not a matter of me caping for one politician or over the other. It's a matter of me saying like, look, clearly one person can do the job when they're given accommodations, and another person can't, and there's a
Yep.
distinguishable difference.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, and then and it's not ageist, right? Like it's a wide spectrum of how people
It
age
isn't.
and when things like that happen. And that can
Yeah,
happen
there are
at
some
any
people who
time.
can still do their job. My grandmother was able to drive like until 2 weeks after she died. 2 weeks until she before she died, and then but then some people, they can't.
Hmm.
So
Absolutely.
it very much is. It's not a matter of age; it's a matter of capacity.
Yep.
Hmm.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And just before, if we move on, a couple of people were talking about the weird, the fat phobia against Trump, and the weird. It's for our says the weird diaper talk about Trump. It's
Hmm.
just like, yeah,
Oh, God, don't get me
that's
started
just
on that.
yeah, that's just it's just ableism. It's just fat phobia. Like it doesn't matter if he's you could talk about how evil and fascist he is. He's not evil and fascist because he's fat. Like
Yeah,
he's not
I mean,
evil and
yeah,
fascist because if he wore a diaper. Like, come on.
yeah. I mean, it was the same deal. Like again, I got into some trouble because like a lot of people made some really like they've made jokes about like Lauren Boebert being a high school dropout, and I'm like, look, there are plenty of reasons to criticize Lauren Boebert. She's an Islamophobe. She bullies people, but look, there's a lot of right wing extremists in the House of Representatives who are dentists. Who
Hmm.
have multiple degrees. Like it's not a mat like you don't need to make fun of her for not having a degree. So.
Right.
Right.
And
Yeah.
again,
And
like people get mad at me for saying that, but I'm just like, look, you guys, a lot of you guys also don't like Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis went to Harvard and Yale, so like,
Right.
right. Yeah. Yeah. And you're hurting other people. You're putting other people in the blast zone whenever you,
yeah, you are.
hurl
That's
invectives
the
like these. It's
perfect
not substantive.
analogy. Yes.
Um, yeah, one thing that really used to bother me, it was more during Trump's candidacy than his presidency. Again, a lot of kind of liberal people would talk about, like, oh, he should be diagnosed with something. He's a narcissist. He's insane. He's whatever. And something that I would just constantly have to, like, point out to them, and this is my, being autistic about, like, psychiatry and psychology, but, like, definitionally, the way we consider mental illnesses is based on that pathology model, and clearly society is rewarding the qualities that he has. So if you want to indict that, you should be indicting like society, how politics works, just how making a public image for yourself works and playing off the media works today. Those are the things to attack. That someone can very easily rise through the ranks who holds the values that he holds so openly. That's the
Yeah.
problem. He's not a uniquely narcissistic person. Basically, any CEO that you meet will have very similar
Rich people
qualities.
brain is a thing, dude. Rich people
Yeah,
brain is a thing.
Yeah.
yeah, and it's contextual and it's incentives.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, God.
Yep.
But man, I've. Can I just say this is so fun?
Yeah. It's so
Yeah.
great to have you on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been so thank you for being a part of this conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um.
Does anybody in the chat have any questions for
Yeah.
Eric?
Yes,
People who
that
have
would
read
Fire
his
away.
hit me.
book?
Yeah,
Yeah.
be like Pat Benatar. Hit me with your best shot. So.
Yes.
Here. Well, start putting questions in the chat. I'll ask my question. What instrument do you play?
I play guitar. I play bass really terribly. So
Oh yeah.
I just play
Nice.
like bonehead bass, just like root notes, but like guitar is the thing that I do.
That's fine. That's fine
Mm.
sometimes.
Yeah.
Mm. In the DC like band speed dating thing, is there like like are there more guitar players and they really need more drum players? Is the market like
A lot, a lot of people are
unbalanced?
drummers and a lot of people are guitar players. What we really need is we really need a there's a dearth of bassists.
Right.
Um, so
I'm
Guitar.
surprised that there. I guess it's probably a more a, a, a more affluent scene because always know that there's not enough drummers because nobody can afford to be a drummer.
like I mean, the great thing about drums and these, like think of it is that because you have a lot of people who are so higher socioeconomic status, like they can like afford drums, or there's just a lot of places where you can play drums, like that are drum studios or things like that.
Right.
So
So Seb had a question about what refrigerator mothers is, and yeah, that's true. We did
oh,
not explain what
so
that
that goes
is.
back to Leo Kanner really kind of began the Leo Kanner who wrote the first major study about autism in 1943. He said that a lot of parents of autistic people were not very affectionate. Bruno Bettelheim was the person who really took the ball and ran with it. For people who don't know, he was a Holocaust survivor, and he said that basically the parents of autistic children wish that their children didn't exist, and he compared them to Nazi prison guards.
Wow.
And he really, I mean, Devin knows the history of this, but like that became conventional wisdom, and that became the predominant paradigm up until like really the 1970s. And it's funny because like there was this one documentary that I saw when I was researching the book. It was this woman named Dorothy Groomer. She lived in Chicago, black woman. She was trying to get her son diagnosed in the 1960s, 1970s with autism, and they said, um, well, he can't be autistic because you're not a refrigerator mother. And like that's
Mm.
the perfect intersection of like sexism, racism, and ableism.
Mm-hmm.
And also let's not be let's not beat around the bush. What was happening a lot during the 1930s and 1940s? A lot of women were entering into the workforce
Right.
because of the Great Depression. And then we had, all the men were going off to war. A lot of women were working on the assembly lines. On top of that, Leo Conner was noticing that a lot of the mothers were high income status professionals like psychiatrists, doctors, lawyers, things like that. And the fathers were so like it was dual income households. So like let's not it was also I think a lot of anxiety in hindsight and like I haven't really seen anybody explore this as much, but like how much of the refrigerator mother thing was also fear of women leaving the leaving the house and entering the workforce.
Yeah.
I'm maybe there's been somebody who's done that. I haven't seen it, but if somebody has seen studies about that, please drop them in the chat or something.
There's
'Cause
definitely some feminist critiques in developmental psychology
yeah, well,
about
like,
that
because
that
even
legacy.
Betty
Yeah.
Friedan and the Feminine Mystique, she like talks about how miserable life is for mothers of autistic parents or some shit like that.
Mm,
Like a lot of, and I know that she was also very homophobic as well, so that doesn't surprise me.
right. Yeah, and also like the overrepresentation of family double income families, like it's the same bias in the diagnostic criteria where it's the parents who have the means to seek help for their
Yeah,
child,
guess who
or
could take the
again, yeah, or those families also have higher, sometimes called in psychology like higher context societies, like high class social mores mean you're going to be more ashamed of having a visibly disabled kid, so then you cart them
Oh
off to
yeah, I
get
mean,
fixed,
again, there's a reason why going back to the beginning of the conversation, the Kennedys, they were trying to, as an Irish Catholic family, trying to become. Joe Senior was very hell bent on making one of his children president of the United States. Like, of course, they were going to be ashamed of. Unfortunately, of course, they were going to be ashamed of disability.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And like a lot of my friends who are neurodivergent who come from really wealthy families, like they got sent to boarding school or they got sent to they got sent away and things like that. So like we talk a lot about intersectionality, but the flip side is a lot of people from elite families they get screwed just as much by ableism.
Yeah, there's a complex dynamic at play where, just as somebody from like a like hillbilly family or whatever, like if you're lower middle class in poverty, like and beyond, like you have way less access to resources, but depending on where you live and your family and community, sometimes there is a broader realm of what's considered acceptable, and people are more reliant on one another, on their neighbors, on their
Yeah,
family members, and so in some ways that can sometimes work out. Anand Prahlad, who wrote The Secret Life of a Black Aspie, he talks about growing up autistic on, his family were sharecroppers and growing up on a farm in a black family in a rural area, and they were all super autistic, and it was fine for him to just like wander around in the field all day because that was where his family lived and they took care of each
Yeah,
other. Like it was not,
yeah,
he didn't find out he was autistic until later on, but in a lot of for a lot of good reasons, that he was
yeah,
not
exactly.
disabled until he
In
went to
a
school.
lot of some of my friends in the Bay Area, they didn't get diagnosed until they were adults because guess what? Everybody's disabled in the everybody was like autistic neurodivergent in the Bay Area, you know. So like,
Hmm.
that kind of cultural cachet plays a huge role.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I also think about my family because my family was my dad until he retired was a well off engineer, and we always had enough money. And I think about I just the one thing that I always think about with that is how hard we tried to find resources for Ben, and how we were able to do so much because of our like class position, and yet how it still there still wasn't resources to fucking access. Like
Yeah.
even with the money that we had, and even with the class position that we had and all that stuff, still it just wasn't anything out there, and we still got Ben, and it still got fucked in every way because like yeah.
There was a study that I included in my book, and it was that like one of the interesting things about Medicaid home and community service waivers is that the people who benefit the most from them oftentimes are upper middle class families and well
Oh
off families
yeah.
because of the fact that a lot of lower income families they're already on Medicaid,
Hmm.
but like getting a Medicaid waiver for a lot of people. Um, for disabled families like who are upper middle class, like upper middle class or even upper class, it actually benefits them because like because they have resources that are available to them that wouldn't otherwise be available. It's another example of I'll give you a perfect example. Senator Maggie Hassan, she's a senator from New Hampshire. Her husband is the former head of Phillips Exeter Academy, um, and she has a son with cerebral palsy, and she says like my son is on Medicaid HCBS, home and community-based service, and she's like he has resources that private insurance wouldn't have provided for him, and this is the reason why he's allowed to, why he's able to thrive, why he's able to
Hmm.
stay at home.
Hmm.
He's not put in an institution.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a lot of barriers where like we certainly can't call being on disability benefits of $14,000 a year in this country and not being able to marry it like a privilege, right? But
Yeah,
in order to be able to access those things, a lot of times you
even
do
the
need
government
legal
monitors your bank
support.
account.
Yeah.
What's that? Yeah, yeah, and the government monitors your bank account, and you can't have more than $2,000 in assets for the rest of your life.
Yep.
Um, but also because it is so hard to apply for, and you often have to reapply and be reevaluated every 6 to 18 months. People who do have some through family access to a lawyer or something like that are going to be more able to actually go through all those hoops to get that paltry, not enough to live on, sum. And so then there's a lot of people who are falling through the cracks who are eligible for it as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
just in navigating the bureaucracy in general too. And if you have any additional
The
barriers, yeah.
bureaucracy in and of itself is a tax.
Yep.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Right.
the nightmare that we, went through fighting CMHs, like multiple different local CMHs, and trying to get help, like to people paid to like help care for Ben, was like such a nightmare that like we were able to do to some degree because we were well off. And my mom never worked, and because my dad like was able to pay for this stuff, and like that just that wouldn't have happened if we weren't well off, because we wouldn't have been able to fight the public institutions for the things that
Yeah,
Ben, the things that they even though it wasn't ever enough, at least the things that the public institutions and Medicaid and all that stuff, we were at least able to get a hold of, but only because
yeah,
my family was relatively well off.
Right. Yeah. And the same thing applies with ADA. Even if a lot of forms of
Right.
discrimination are illegal, can you actually pursue a case?
yeah. I mean, this is the point that I've always made, is that like is that the ADA, the problem, the difficulty is that it's a passive law, meaning the individual has to file a lawsuit. There isn't like somebody who actively inspects it. There isn't. It was intentionally created. The only way that you could get Republicans on to vote for it was that it wouldn't be this like active government like actively enforcing it. It's like it requires people to um, to file lawsuits. And like the thing that I've said, and one person brought this up to me one time when I was writing a piece for the Washington Post about it, is that the problem is that by doing it, by putting the onus on the person, they almost kind of have to become a stink bug in the community, especially if they have to file a lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, even if they do file a lawsuit and the place changes, they kind of can't go to that restaurant anymore, you know? They kind of
Right.
can't go, because they file a lawsuit, they sued them, and it's like, if I were a business owner, I wouldn't want somebody to come in who sued me, I'd be like, fine, but so it does create this, weirdly enough, because the ADA is such a passive law, it prevents, it does cause a barrier to them entering into the community with large.
Yeah.
Right. And in the 90s, as the 88 was kind of coming into effect, that was like the heyday of media coverage of like frivolous lawsuits and demeaning
Yes, it
anybody who did
was.
sue. And also just media depictions. It always stands out with me. There's an episode of The L Word where there's a social worker visiting their house who uses a wheelchair. And they just write her as this complete bitch who's like mad that she can't get into their house because it doesn't have a ramp. And how dare she expect this home to have a ramp? It's this complete, just awful depiction of like the entitled bitter disabled person that is never the reality, and that's like the only depiction of like physically disabled people we have on screen other than people who are faking their disability entirely. Like those are
Right.
the tropes.
Um,
um the
yeah, yeah.
oh,
Um, I think I might have time for one or more question, one or two more questions. Then I need to get back to doing this. But like, yeah, fire away.
Yeah, you've
of
got a
course, sure, yeah.
I know
It's a
you have a
busy day.
lot. It's a busy day for you with the Supreme Court decision stuff. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for so much for still taking so much time to spend with us.
yeah.
The Argyle asked, I'm so interested in connections overlaps between autism, ADHD, and OCD. Have you come across anything like that either in research or just talking to people?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of autistic people who are OCD, and I think a lot of people who initially might be diagnosed with OCD often get later diagnosed as being autistic. So there definitely is that overlap. I don't think that there's been enough stuff. Again, one of the I'm pro biology, I'm pro research. I want there to be more research on this.
Right.
I you know I so like I don't want to say, oh, there is or there isn't, just because like there I want to know if there is more.
Right. Yeah, and just anecdotally, I've seen a lot of people get diagnosed as OCD first as kids because there's just a clear behavioral
Yes.
component sometimes you can see, and then later on they find out,
Yeah.
oh, actually it's
Yes, that exactly,
yeah,
that's absolutely a thing. Yes.
yeah. Um, But yeah, yeah, you have already given us 2.5 hours of amazing conversation. We should probably throw up your info about your book for everybody.
Yes.
Everybody,
Thank
if
you.
you haven't read We're Not Broken Yet, it's really excellent. You get just such a huge span of the autistic experience throughout the U.S. as well as great policy discussion. It's just really incredible. And look out for Eric's article coming up now about the Kennedy's legacy on disability as well as all of his other excellent reporting. He just does such a great job of threading the needle when there's so many countervailing forces and historical context and things to consider when we talk about disability that you just don't get in a lot of these conversations. And he always just brings that richness and that depth. And I'm just
I really appreciate that.
so honored to know you. Yeah.
Maddie, now you and I need to meet because I finally met Devin. So Maddie, you next time I'm in Michigan, I need to meet you.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
All right, I'm grateful. Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Thanks for being here. Yeah, that was so nice. I
That
was
was
like, oh
great.
God, yeah. I was like, oh God, this must be such a stressful day for him with all of this reporting.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
so he was a real one for spending so much time. Um,
absolutely.
yeah. Oh, Seb asked, do you know when autism was first officially recognized? So the first person diagnosed as autistic just died
Wow.
recently. Yeah. Let me pull up his story. Donald Trippett. He was diagnosed in 1943.
Wow.
Um,
I had no
yeah,
idea.
and he just passed away on June 22nd. Um, to give you a sense of how recently this was even beginning to be named as a thing.
That's wild. That's really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and Eric did also has written a little bit about him. Don Trippett had like a very full, rich life, like very much not informed as much by the pathology paradigm because people
Right.
didn't know bad shit, didn't have bad conceptions of what autism was yet. So,
Right.
so he's a really interesting person to like learn more about.
That's really good.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, is there any introduction? It's for our ask. Is there any introductory reading you'd recommend on the history of autism?
Steve Silberman's Neurotribes for sure is the good like just rough history of here's how this thing was defined. Here's the history of the first people studying it. Um, that's that's the text, and Steve is great. He's also working right now on a history of oh god what's the disease where you like get a lot of fluids in your lungs? I think it's like CF or something like that. Um, but he's doing another really rich history of disability right now about the life of a friend of his. So I'm really excited to read that when it comes out.
Um, cystic fibrosis.
Cystic fibrosis. That's right. CF. Yes.
Thank you, Jen
Um,
Laham.
yeah. Yeah. The Taste of Salt is going to be the name of the book about cystic fibrosis. And I'm sure it'll be amazing. He says coming out 2025. So you know he's doing deep research.
Yeah.
He really brings it, like, which is amazing.
Um. So we got another half hour of our regularly scheduled thing. I think we got a couple. We haven't done a fucking freak of the week in a while, so we should do that. But first, before we do that, I wanted to. I don't.
Yes, the
So
dollhouse.
yes. So I don't even know if I don't have anything to present. We didn't get Eric's pick for it, unfortunately, because I do like the idea of asking guests.
Yeah, if we had had more time with him,
Oh yeah.
I was thinking about it, but I was like, oh man, he's having to write emails right now while he's still here. Can't do this to my man, to my boy.
I know. So but I wanted to bring it up because we've been thinking about the dollhouse. Um and I wanted to ask yeah, Golem's eyes are still a horror. Oh wait, for some reason I'm not
Yeah, you're
in
not in the dollhouse right
I know.
now.
Hold on. Let me
The
what?
dollhouse needs a hidden Mickey in solidarity with Disney adults.
Oh my god,
I
that's a
agree.
really good idea. That's a very good idea.
But we can't do it on stream because then you guys would know where the hidden Mickey is. So
No, why I can't I don't know where I am. Why am I not showing up?
are you? Yeah, are you off screen? Like,
It's not letting me why won't you let me copy? That's so strange. It won't let me copy myself.
I know that your head was on somebody. I think you were on Garnet or somebody for a while, but I don't know. Were you upstairs? I don't...
Okay, wait. I think I got it.
Okay.
Uh, okay, there we go.
Thin blue line lightsaber flags. Oh my god, I have not seen that. That's awful.
Uh, oh my god. Okay, so the reason I wanted to come into the dollhouse, we could add a person, but what I wanted to talk about because I wanted player participation because I want this to turn into I want this to be a full reality show. So I think what we should do is a full reality show slash tournament is my goal. So what I want to do is I want to get rid of everybody. I was thinking maybe we get rid of everybody except like Link, because Link Vanit added Link, right?
Hmm.
So because
Yeah.
I think we should make all of our guests add people. I want some kind of chubby kumquat. I don't know what I'm looking at. This is the dollhouse. This is the dollhouse. It all came
I don't understand why this is confusing to you.
basically the where this came from was there's this meme on Tumblr that's like Tumblr users play with JPEGs like dolls, and I was like, we have the technology on OBS that we can play with JPEGs like dolls, so we need to do that, and
Here's
that's
old Snake. Yeah.
here's old Snake, and we have Gronk, and yeah, so we've just been adding people.
Poopify.
Poopify. So yeah, so I want some kind of system because I loved because the other week when we voted, we had y'all vote who should be voted off. And we voted
And they
off.
voted off Germa.
They voted off Germa, smoking Germa, and so I loved that, and I want for us to create some kind of system where y'all are suggesting who is going into this going into the dollhouse, and then also some kind of thing where we're voting people off. And I think there should be games. I think that guests should have to come on and suggest people, but then also defend their choice, and then we have people voted on. I want this to be a whole game, but I don't have the specifics because I want there to be like audience participation. Like everybody who gets voted off, we should put it to an audience poll. So the reason I'm saying all this without a clear plan is because I want your suggestions for
Mm,
how to make this work. Uh,
yes. Yeah. Yeah, because the original loose idea was like, okay, we can have a set number of people that are allowed in the dollhouse. Guests add one, we add one thematically related every stream, whatever, or
mhm.
people suggest ones. So then we have to vote somebody off. But yeah, like if we're gonna start with a fresh slate, like how do we go about like yeah, how do we gamify this more? What are the challenges? What are the metrics? I'm trying to think of like board games or like games that are an analogy because like Clue it's more about exploring the house, so it's not that
Yeah.
like
But we
or
could
like that
add more
haunted mansion
rooms.
thing.
That was the thing we said. We could add more rooms. I think these
Yes,
people
that's
should
true.
date. I think we should make them kiss for some reason.
Oh yeah. Oh my god. Wait a second. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. I feel like those foreplay dice that are like
Oh my
lick, elbow, like we could make like some kind of wheel or dice that tells us who should be doing what with whom and such.
oh, wait, where's Snake? There's so many images on this scene. I can't find all.
I know, yeah, and figuring out what you can move, like what layer it's on. Oh my god. Oh,
I thought, maybe Sonic and Snake need to get to go to know each
get
other better.
together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they both have experiences with clones. They both have evil clones, so they have a lot in common.
Yeah.
And yeah, and with actually they have a lot of things in common. They have robotified opponents.
Yep.
Um, they're freaks of experimentation.
They're both
And
animals because
they're both
he's
animals.
Sonic the Hedgehog and Solid Snake. He's a snake. He's a furry
Yeah,
snake boy.
yeah, yeah. They've both been cloned and experimented on.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah.
So they could go on a date. But anyway,
They could go
I
on a date.
how is Grimes not in here?
Oh, yeah, that's true. I mean,
How do guests get added just by guests? That's the thing. We've just added them at random. I started with a slate of people because I didn't want the dollhouse to be empty. Um,
mm,
so we've kind of added people as they've come up. So we talked about Baby Gronk and Hoopify, and so they got in there. The Kinkajou was one of our freaks of the week, and so he got added
mhm,
in there. Golem, we talked about Golem because Golem is the ultimate birthday boy. So, but I'd like for the audience to be able to suggest people, and then like if enough people agree that they should, it should be able to get in. But
mhm.
I don't know how that works exactly. Like,
And we can also have decorating the house. We can have incentives
ooh,
for subscribers or
ooh,
something to do with that where you either have veto power or you can decorate the house. I don't know.
yes, I love that idea. That maybe every subscriber, because a character is a lot. Maybe every subscriber gets to add a a decoration
Yeah,
to
like
the house. I like that a lot, actually.
that's great. I think we could start with just that.
Yeah.
Like right now even, but like,
Yeah,
somebody
if
can
you're a
want to
if you're a
blush.
subscriber and you have a suggestion for decorations, put
Yeah,
it in there.
appliances, stuffies, whatever. Um, wall art.
Um The people that come up a lot are terrible people that I don't want to look at all the time, like Elon. Yeah, that's
Well,
true.
I
That's
mean,
true.
some of these people aren't easy to look at. Can we say that? The Hoopify's dead-eyed stare. You know, I'm sure he's perfectly fine to look at in person, but when he's in his trance of doing TikToks, he's very scary. Gronk is looming over us with a malevolent energy. Um,
Can we give them the Lego Home Alone house? That's yes, that's such a specific ask. I actually did the Lego Home Alone house with my spouse's family. It was so fun. Oh my god, it was so fun.
oh my god, I don't. So wait, there's a Lego set that's the Home Alone house.
Yes.
Whoa,
Oh, there's a perfect picture of it too.
this. And I thought I was a real Home Alone head.
Yeah. So basically, my spouse's family has a tradition. Well, not we've done it a couple years where the first one don't cancel me, but we bought they bought it. I didn't have anything to do with it. They bought the um Hogwarts set, the big castle, and then we watched all
Mm.
the Harry Potter movies, knowing it was bad, but it was very fun. So we're like binging a thing and then watching, and so we watched the Home Alone movies, and we built the. I said we should watch all of them because I don't know if you know, there's like 6 Home Alone movies.
Oh, geez. With the yeah, once they switched to a different kid, I was like, no.
Yeah, there's a lot of really. I haven't actually seen them, but I've heard there's a lot of really bad ones.
Oh
Um,
god, it's like Land Before Time.
ooh, Aries have a wall hanging you can do.
Well, I mean, my mind goes to like thinking of all of the like honored and cherished Aries figures like Damon Albarn and
Oh yeah,
Mariah
there's that picture.
Carey. And,
There's
yeah,
that
oh
picture
yeah,
of all of them. Can you bring that up? Can we just like
yeah.
put that
Not
as a
all Aries. Yeah,
as a
the
picture?
not all Aries image. Yeah. Oh my god, it's so busy. It's so crazy. Okay, yeah, this one's got Elton John. Oh yeah. Let me- I don't know where to put it. I can just put it in the. Where should I send the image
Oh,
thing to?
that's a good question. I guess Facebook?
Okay. Yeah, our new streaming platform doesn't have a chat like Zoom.
Uh
God. I every time I look at it, there's people that I've forgotten. Rachel Maddow. Zach Braff. Oh God. See, this is good because a lot of it is cursed, but some of them are good.
Damn it, I need
Steven
you
Tyler.
I need you as not I need you as a PNG.
Oh God. Oh, the Twitter image shit. Okay, hold
Well,
on.
no, not that. The one I'm trying to do oh, I'm trying to do the Lego one, but it's a the WebP, I
Oh.
think. Something wild I didn't know. The Talkboy Coven uses in the Home Alone 2 didn't exist until that movie. They made the toy for the movie and then sold them after and made more money from that than from the film directly? What the fuck?
That's crazy. Wow. I remember coveting that thing when I saw that movie, and then the ads afterward.
That's
That's crazy.
wild. Uh,
Smart.
Toyetic.
Wait, is Macaulay Culkin's brother that you're talking about Chubby Kumquat the Succession one, the little one who pisses the bed in Home Alone 1? That what's his name? Culkin, Kieran Culkin or whatever. Is it, or does he have another brother other than that one?
God, this putting things in the dollhouse because the internet is the way it is terrible because now I have to do a I have to use a web thing to convert it from WebP to a PNG and then convert it from that to transparent with a different like.
Oh my god, yes. All the little applets.
There we go. Look at how beautiful that is, though. Whoever suggested remove.bg,
Oh yeah.
thank you.
Oh, that's gorgeous. Now they can play toys.
Yes. Oh, here I'll
Play
make
toys
it big so
together.
we can see. So we can see how cool it is. There's like all this weird stuff. Like there's a zip line back here. There's like uh there's so many things.
That's crazy. And you guys all built it together watching the
Yes,
movies?
it was very
That's
fun.
so wholesome.
I
Oh,
know.
like fuck a gingerbread house. That's so cool.
I know. They can play toys on Hannibal's desk.
Yeah. Oh my god. Tell me, Will, are you the home invader or are you a malevolent child?
Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh, that's so ridiculous.
How long did it take to build the house? Ergo is
Oh, I
asking.
don't know. I don't remember. I think it took a number of movies. Oh yeah, we have to make this big first to look at it.
Yeah, oh my god, yeah. So everybody, tag yourself. Lady Gaga, Elton John, John Cusack, Samira Wiley.
Oh, is that Golem? There's Golem.
Oh yeah, yeah. Who would have thought? But
The
again, it's very physical.
mm-hmm.
Autistics are very physical. Uh, oh, I didn't know Jack White was an Aries. Every time I look at this, I learn a new one. Billy
Eric
Kyoko.
Andre,
Mm-hmm.
Al Gore.
Oh.
Okay, that would be a fun version of the dollhouse maybe someday where we just put all of the Aries house and we just put all
Oh my
these real
God.
people in it.
Reba McEntire. Yeah, Seb, you're right. Eric Andre does have Sagittarius energy. He's like very. I'm scared. Like I love him, but I'm scared. Like if he's in the room, I'm really scared what's gonna happen.
Oh,
And that's what a Sag will do
look,
to
now
you.
it's like one of the
It's
pictures
on the mantle.
Yeah.
I love that it's impossible to discern what it is,
Yeah, it's like
which
5
is very
pixels.
good. Which is very good. But that you could zoom it up at any time. Like the data
Yeah.
is still there. Like
Oh yeah.
if we need to consult the Aries chart. Oh, it's like, oh, okay. Oh, is that Jonathan Groff from fucking Hamilton? God.
I don't know who any of these people are.
That is him. Oh my god. See, I learn a new one every time.
Is that Spock or the actor that plays Spock? Because I'm sure
That's a
Spock
good.
has a canonical birthday.
Mm, that's a good question. I bet Spot could be an Aries, and Leonard Nimoy could be an Aries too.
Adrian Brody. Adrian Brody. Um. Okay, so we got 10 more minutes. I wanted to
Yes.
let's see if we haven't done uh a freak of the week in a long time.
Oh hell yeah.
So let's get that theme music going. Um I'm so glad that has never given us trouble on YouTube.
It's you edited the clip and it's just short enough clip that you know to find.
So, uh let's see. Bo Beebs uh from from uh from the chat uh sent me
Oh.
this one. And it's we'll see. I haven't really looked into it yet. All I have is this image which I had seen before. 'Cause it's
Oh boy, what a freak! What a little that's not real. That's not real. It's got stick-on eyes. What the fuck?
yeah.
That's not real.
Let's see. Let's see if it's real.
I'm so happy.
Uh, Bobby says, there's already a Know Your Meme page, but Sakabam Baspis has become viral on Japan Twitter, and I just found out about him. So yeah, there's a meme, a Know Your Meme page, reputable animal facts page.
Yes.
Know
I mean,
Your Meme.
I would trust it more than a lot of websites. Sakabam.
It is apparently is an extinct animal, according to Know Your Meme.
Oh, so we can't see one in motion, probably.
No.
That can't. What the fuck?
So I think it's a real animal, and it's just this terrible model. Look at this though. Oh.
Oh, they can't see the image on stream for some reason.
Oh really? Oh yeah. Sorry. Hold on. Apologies. Thank you for yelling at me. Right? That's the one. Thank you for your patience.
Yes, and thank you for letting us know.
Yes. Now you should be able to see. So this was the original image that I was sent.
Oh my god.
Look at him. Look at him.
That's so stupid. That's not real. That looks like the live action segments of SpongeBob. Like
yeah. Oh my god. He looks like an emoji.
yes. He's so stupid.
He's an autism creature for sure.
Yes. He does not know what's happening.
Extremely
He's feeling
shaped.
good.
Says Jen Laham.
Yeah.
So
He's
yeah.
having fun.
So yeah, this is the meme Know Your Meme page. I love these little guys. People have made different images. So yeah, I think it's a real animal that was just this terrible taxidermy or like
Okay,
recreation.
so it did not look like that in life.
Reconstructed model of animal displayed at the Natural History Museum of Helsinki, Finland. And then there's apparently a song. So we can listen to this song.
Ooh. Ooh, yeah. Can you hear that shot?
Is this the name? I think this is the name of it.
Oh. Oh, okay, we're learning.
This is so
Let's
good.
go. Oh, he can get big. Oh, he can explode. Oh, yeah. Break it down, girls.
Except, oh, it's a fossil Pokemon.
Oh, yeah, that explains it for sure.
That's really good.
It's coming. Oh my god.
Voltorb face.
Yeah. And long torpedo body.
Extremely good. Extremely good.
Wow.
Put that link in the chat.
That's beautiful. What a fucking freak.
Um, so yeah, I'm gonna do some gaming in a second here. Uh, I I'm gonna play a very ridiculous game. Oops. Oh no, you can still hear me, right? Hello, Devin? Uh-oh. Maybe we lost Devin. I forget that I can't close that. Oh no. We can still see you. Oh wait, maybe if I This is a new system. I forget. Hold on, hold on. Doing surgery. Uh okay. Hello. No? We can't hear Devin either. We can see him. Wait, can you hear us? Wait, sorry. I'm looking at you now. Can you hear us? No. Oh, yeah, he's gonna communicate. Oh
It's
wait, here we
fine.
go.
Okay.
I closed the window. Silencing trans men. I'm doing a
Oh
trans
my god.
misandry.
Misandry, misandrophobia. Oh. I was about to start writing notes, even though I think it's backwards. Let me look and see if it's backwards.
No, it's not. It is for you, but it's
Okay.
not for us.
Oh, okay.
I forget that this is happening in a browser window so I
Oh,
closed I
yeah.
closed my browser. Um oh my god. But that we got you back, thankfully.
Help. Help.
Oh my god.
But yes, you're gonna be playing Hyper Hell.
Yes. Do we have any hyperpop fans in the chat? Because this is going to be a very niche experience. It's probably going to be fun regardless, but
Yes, you'll
there is a
learn.
game. Yeah, there is a game called Hyper Hell that was basically there's a band called Food House. You may have heard of 100 gecs. 100 gecs is probably one of the more the larger Hyper Hell or sorry Jesus, the larger vaguely hyper pop artists. And Food House was a band that went on that released an album on their label. Um, and yeah, this is a game that stars the Guppy and Fraxum, the musicians in Food House. So it's going, and there's a boss that is Ronald Reagan. There's also other hyperpop artists now. So there's DJ Recode and also Tracy Breaks, and also there is fucking me. There's Bingle. There is Bingle, voiced by Mia Arson Kraimu, who we talked about a while ago. So
Yes.
this is going to be a very strange game that I'm very excited about. And might get my VOD taken down because of unlicensed music. Um, and then we'll probably play some more Tears of the Kingdom after that because I don't think it'll probably last that long.
Fuck yeah.
Now let's make sure that we don't flash odd sound flashbang our audience when I open up.
Oh yeah, hit every button at once.
Yeah. Oh, it did it to me.
Oh,
Oh, it's a
I don't
bad
hear it.
sound. Good.
Oh.
Oh wait, no, the audience
Eh.
does hear it. I think I pressed the wrong button and
Oh.
the audience does hear it.
Oh no.
Sorry for the audio crime. Um this is. I don't think that there is a way to do. Like, there's a lot of things that I've done that make this. Okay, good, good.
All right,
They didn't
that's
hear
good.
it. Did you hear it?
I didn't hear it. No.
Okay.
It's you.
There.
You were just in hell.
Yeah. There was there's a lot of things that I've done to make this, like, I've put a lot of effort into doing dumb things I don't really need. But I don't think there's any way to raid myself without it just being fucking weird.
Yeah, that's very chaotic.
Okay. Um all right. We're going to raid my own channel. I'm going to take a bio break. Maybe have a snack and I'll be right there. Thank you everybody for hanging out. This was such a fun stream.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks everyone for being here.
I'll plug Eric Garcia's stuff one more time.
Yes.
Please go follow him everywhere. Go if you're in DC, go go to that show.
Yes. Yes. Go to that band thing sounds cool.
It sounds
That
really
shit,
cool.
like, yeah.
Oh, of course. I don't see myself yet.
Let's see.
There we go. Oh,
Okay, cool.
I definitely put the wrong information on there. But that's okay.
Oh, it's like stream info.
Yeah.
Oh, the Oberdin stuff. Oh yeah. Oh well.
All right. Thank you again. See you guys soon.
All right.